Hello, friends. Tonight we're heading somewhere far from heroic battlefield legends or glamorous tales of Roman conquest. This is the slow-motion misery of life as a Roman gladiator. The word gladiator might bring to mind roaring crowds, dramatic duels, and stories of bravery. But for the men who actually lived this life, it was less about honor and more about surviving each day. Exhaustion, injury, and fear were constant companions. Picture endless hours of punishing training. Cheap barley meals designed to fatten you up, not for your own good, but to make your body more dramatic when struck in the arena. Imagine bruises that never fully heal, and the lingering ache of muscles pushed past their limit. The sand under your feet, the sweat clinging to your skin, and the constant awareness that your next fight could easily be your last. The roar of the crowd above, and the cold, silent stare of your opponent standing across from you. Before we get started, take a second to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy these sleepy, deep dive journeys into history. And feel free to drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fun to see the mix of night owls, insomniacs, and early risers joining in. So, dim the lights. Get comfortable. Maybe let a fan run in the background for that soft, steady hum that helps you drift. Let your mind settle as we ease into tonight's story. We'll start inside the dusty, exhausting training yards of ancient Rome. Let's begin. Imagine waking up, not in a bed, but on a thin mat laid across cold stone. The air is heavy with the scent of sweat, leather, and dust. Around you, other men stir. Some groan softly as they shift aching limbs. Others are already awake, quietly wrapping cloth around their wrists or examining bruises earned the day before. This is not a place of comfort. This is a ludus, a gladiator training school. The walls around you rise high and unforgiving, built from massive blocks of stone that have witnessed countless mornings just like this one. Decades of men have slept on these same floors, their bodies pressed against the same unforgiving surface that now cradles your own weary frame. The stone remembers everything. Every drop of blood, every tear shed in the darkness, every whispered prayer for freedom that will never come. Your sleeping quarters are cramped beyond imagination. 20, sometimes 30 men share a space barely large enough for half that number. The air grows thick and stale during the night, heavy with the breath of the desperate and the dying. Some men snore loudly, their exhausted bodies finally finding the rest that eluded them during training. Others toss restlessly, their dreams filled with visions of sand and steel and the screaming crowds that await them. The thin mat beneath you offers little protection from the cold stone floor. Your hip bones ache where they press against the unforgiving surface. Your shoulder throbs from sleeping on your side, the only position that fits in the narrow space allotted to each man. There are no pillows here, no blankets to ward off the chill that seeps through the stone walls. Only the shared warmth of bodies pressed too close together, and the rough woolen tunics that serve as your only protection against the elements. Your day begins before sunrise, before the city streets fill with merchants and senators, before the bakeries release the warm smell of bread. You are already on your feet. There is no slow morning here. The lanista, your trainer and manager, expects discipline. Disobedience brings harsh words, or worse. The awakening comes not with gentle stirring, but with the harsh clang of iron against stone. A guard strikes his sword against the metal bars that separate your sleeping quarters from the corridor beyond. The sound echoes through the stone chambers like thunder, jarring every man from whatever fitful sleep he might have found. There is no snooze button here, no luxury of rolling over for a few more precious minutes of rest. The sound means rise, and rise you do, or face the consequences. Your body protests as you push yourself upright. Every muscle aches from the previous day's training. Your hands are stiff and swollen, the knuckles scraped raw from gripping wooden practice weapons for hours on end. Your back creaks as you straighten. Vertebrae, popping like twigs underfoot. This is what your body has become. A collection of aches and pains, bruises and cuts, all in service of the entertainment that awaits in the arena. Around you, other men struggle to their feet with similar difficulty. Some are younger, their bodies still adjusting to the brutal demands placed upon them. Others are veterans, their faces marked by years of combat, their movements careful and calculated to avoid aggravating old injuries that never quite healed properly. The youngest gladiators often look to these older men for guidance, hoping to learn the secrets of survival in a world where death lurks around every corner. The morning ritual begins immediately. There is no time for stretching, no gentle transition from sleep to wakefulness. Each man reaches for his possessions, though possessions is perhaps too grand a word for the meager belongings allowed to gladiators. A spare tunic, if you're fortunate enough to have one. Strips of cloth for binding wounds or wrapping wrists. Perhaps a small piece of bone or stone carried for luck, though luck seems to be in short supply within these walls. Some men mutter prayers under their breath as they prepare for the day ahead. Others remain silent, their faces set in grim determination. The gods they pray to are as varied as the men themselves. Roman gods, Germanic deities, Egyptian spirits, Celtic protectors. In the ludus, all faiths blend together in the shared hope for survival and the distant dream of freedom. Breakfast is simple. A bowl of grain porridge, sometimes thick and lumpy, sometimes thin like soup. Occasionally, there is a piece of bread, but never enough to leave you full. The diet of a gladiator is high in carbohydrates. Barley, beans, and grains fill your stomach. The goal is not health or comfort, but to build a layer of body fat, not for vanity, but for survival. A thicker body bleeds more slowly, giving you more time in the arena and making the spectacle last longer for the crowd. The dining hall, if it can be called that, is a long, narrow room with wooden benches arranged in parallel rows. The tables are rough-hewn planks, scarred by years of use, and marked with the initials and crude drawings left by men who knew they might not live to see another meal. The bowls are clay, chipped and cracked, but functional. Each man receives his portion and nothing more. There are no seconds here, no opportunity to ask for additional food, no matter how hungry you might be. The porridge varies in quality, depending on the mood of the cooks and the supplies available. On good days, it might contain pieces of dried fruit or nuts, small luxuries that make the meal almost palatable. On bad days, it's little more than gruel, watery and flavorless, designed solely to fill the stomach and provide the basic energy needed for training. The bread, when it appears, is dark and heavy, made from coarse grains that scratch the throat as you swallow. But this diet serves a purpose beyond mere sustenance. The high carbohydrate content helps build subcutaneous fat, a layer of protection beneath the skin that can mean the difference between life and death in the arena. When a sword cuts deep, the fat bleeds more slowly than muscle, giving a gladiator precious extra seconds to continue fighting. The crowd prefers longer battles, more dramatic confrontations, and the lanista knows that well-fed gladiators, paradoxically fed on the cheapest possible food, provide better entertainment value. Water accompanies every meal, drawn from wells deep beneath the ludus. It tastes of earth and stone, sometimes carrying a metallic tang that speaks of the iron pipes that carry it through the underground passages. The water is often tepid, never cold enough to be truly refreshing, but it serves its purpose. Dehydration can kill a gladiator faster than any weapon, and the trainers know this well. The other men eat in relative silence, each lost in his own thoughts. Conversation exists, but it's muted, cautious. Friendships form slowly in the ludus, if they form at all. Today's training partner might be tomorrow's opponent in the arena. The man sharing a meal with you this morning might be lying dead in the sand by evening. It's safer to keep relationships at arm's length, though human nature makes complete isolation impossible. After eating, training begins. It does not stop for hours. The sun climbs higher, but there is little shade in the open training yard. The sand beneath your feet grows warm, sticking to your skin as sweat pours freely. Wooden practice swords, called rudies, strike against wooden posts or other trainees. The weapons may be dull, but the bruises they leave are deep and lasting. The training yard is the heart of the ludus, a rectangular space surrounded by high walls that prevent any glimpse of the world beyond. The ground is covered in sand, coarse and gritty, that serves multiple purposes. It absorbs blood during practice sessions, provides traction for footwork drills, and prepares gladiators for the arena floors they will eventually face. This sand gets everywhere, in your hair, between your teeth, ground into every fold of your clothing. It becomes part of you, as much as the scars and calluses that mark your transformation from man to weapon. The wooden training posts, called palace, stand like silent sentinels throughout the yard. Each is roughly 6 feet tall, wrapped in straw and leather to simulate a human opponent. They bear the marks of countless practice sessions. Deep gouges from wooden swords, scuff marks from shields, indentations where frustrated trainees have beaten them with their bare fists. These posts are your first opponents, the foundation upon which all other training builds. The rudies feels foreign in your hands at first. If you were a soldier before arriving at the ludus, you might have some familiarity with weapons. But the gladiator's arsenal is different from military equipment. The wooden practice sword is heavier than it appears, deliberately weighted to build strength in the arms and shoulders. Hours of swinging this blunted weapon will develop the muscle memory and endurance needed for real combat. Your first attempts at swordplay are clumsy and uncoordinated. The weapon feels unwieldy, like an extension of your body that doesn't quite belong. You swing too hard, leaving yourself off balance. You grip too tightly, causing your hands to cramp and your movements to become rigid. The trainers watch with critical eyes, noting every mistake, every moment of weakness that might prove fatal in the arena. But gradually, through repetition and pain, you begin to understand. The sword becomes less foreign, more familiar. Your grip loosens slightly, allowing for more fluid movement. Your stance improves, feet planted firmly in the sand, knees bent to provide stability and mobility. The connection between mind and muscle strengthens with each passing hour. You practice footwork, lunges, blocks, and dodges. Over and over again. Your legs burn, your shoulders ache. Breathing becomes shallow, but stopping is not an option. The footwork drills are perhaps the most grueling aspect of training, though their importance cannot be overstated. In the arena, mobility often means the difference between life and death. A gladiator who cannot move quickly and efficiently is a dead gladiator, no matter how skilled with weapons he might be. The sand shifts beneath your feet with every step, requiring constant adjustment and balance. What feels stable on solid ground becomes treacherous on the loose surface of the training yard. Forward lunges build power in the legs while teaching proper attacking form. Each lunge must be precise, controlled, ready to be followed by immediate recovery or a follow-up strike. Your thigh muscles burn as you repeat the movement hundreds of times, the sand providing resistance that makes every step more difficult than it would be on firm ground. Sweat streams down your face, stinging your eyes and making your grip slippery on the wooden weapon. Backward steps and side movements are equally important. A gladiator must be able to retreat quickly when faced with a superior position, or circle an opponent to find an opening. The sand makes these movements challenging, as your feet can slip or sink unexpectedly. Balance becomes everything. One moment of instability can create an opening for an opponent to exploit. Blocking drills teach you to read incoming attacks and respond appropriately. The wooden shield, if your fighting style requires one, must become an extension of your arm. It protects not just your body, but your sword arm, creating opportunities for counterattacks. The shield's weight adds another layer of complexity to every movement, changing your center of gravity and requiring constant adjustment. Dodging might seem like the simplest skill, but it requires perfect timing and spatial awareness. Too early, and your opponent can adjust their attack. Too late, and you're dead. The margin for error is measured in fractions of seconds, distances measured in inches. Your body learns to read the subtle signs that precede an attack. The shift in weight, the tensing of muscles, the slight adjustment in grip that indicates which direction a blow will come from. The lanista walks among the men, barking corrections in a voice worn hoarse from years of shouting. When someone falters, a leather strap delivers a sharp reminder to keep moving. The lanista is a figure both feared and respected within the ludus. Often a former gladiator himself, he understands intimately what his trainees are experiencing because he has lived through it. His body bears the scars of countless battles, proof of his survival skills, and evidence of his credibility. When he speaks, men listen, because his words carry the weight of hard-won experience. His voice cuts through the sounds of combat like a blade through flesh. Every word is carefully chosen, designed to correct specific mistakes or reinforce important techniques. He sees everything, the slight drop in guard that would prove fatal against a real opponent, the footwork that places a trainee off balance, the grip that will cause the weapon to slip at the crucial moment. His eyes miss nothing, and his corrections are immediate and unforgiving. The leather strap he carries is not merely symbolic. When verbal correction fails to achieve the desired result, physical reinforcement follows swiftly. The strap leaves welts across shoulders, arms, and legs, painful reminders of lessons that must be learned. In the ludus, pain is a teacher, and failure to learn can mean death. The lanista's harsh methods serve a purpose, better to endure the sting of leather during training than the bite of steel in the arena. Some trainees resent the constant criticism and physical punishment. They see the lanista as a tyrant, a man who takes pleasure in their suffering. But the wise ones understand the truth. Every harsh word, every stinging blow of the strap is an investment in their survival. The lanista has seen too many promising fighters die because they failed to master basic techniques. His cruelty is born not of malice, but of necessity. Between the shouted commands and corrections, the lanista offers insights that can only come from experience. He points out weaknesses in an opponent's style that can be exploited. He teaches the subtle psychological warfare that can break an enemy's concentration. He shares the hard-learned lessons about when to press an attack and when to conserve energy for a longer battle. If you were lucky, you had previous combat experience. Perhaps you served as a soldier. If not, you learn quickly, or you do not last long. Military experience provides some advantages in gladiator training, but it can also be a hindrance. Soldiers learn to fight as part of a unit, relying on their comrades for protection and support. They use standardized weapons and tactics designed for battlefield effectiveness rather than individual combat. The transition from military to gladiatorial combat requires unlearning as much as learning new skills. Former soldiers often struggle with the psychological aspects of gladiatorial combat. On the battlefield, killing is a duty performed for the glory of Rome and the protection of fellow soldiers. In the arena, killing becomes entertainment, performed for the pleasure of crowds who view the combatants as little more than exotic animals. This shift in purpose can be psychologically devastating for men who once took pride in their military service. Those without military experience face different challenges. They must learn not only combat techniques, but also the mental discipline required to function under extreme stress. The sounds of clashing weapons, the sight of blood, the knowledge that death stalks every moment of combat can overwhelm the unprepared mind. Some men break under this pressure, becoming passive in the face of danger. Others develop a berserker fury that makes them dangerous but ultimately ineffective fighters. The truly successful gladiators, regardless of their background, learn to find a balance between aggression and control. They develop the ability to remain calm under pressure while maintaining the killer instinct necessary for survival. This mental discipline often proves more important than physical skill, as even the most technically proficient fighter can be defeated by panic or overconfidence. Gladiators are categorized and trained according to fighting style. Some become murmillos, wearing heavy armor and carrying large rectangular shields. Others are trained as retieri, fighting with a net and trident, lightly armored and always vulnerable. The classification system creates specialists rather than generalists, each type of gladiator trained to excel in their particular style of combat. The decision of which type you become is rarely yours to make. The Lanista evaluates new arrivals based on their physical attributes, previous experience, and perceived strengths and weaknesses. A tall, lean man with quick reflexes might be destined for the Retiarius class, while a shorter, more powerfully built individual could find himself training as a murmillo. The murmillo represents the classic image of the gladiator, heavily armored, carrying a large shield and wielding a short sword called a gladius. The helmet completely encases the head, with only small eye holes providing vision. The armor includes a manica, a segmented arm guard that protects the sword arm, and an ocria, a shin guard on the left leg. This equipment provides substantial protection, comes at the cost of mobility and endurance. Training as a murmillo focuses on strength and defensive technique. The large shield, or scutum, weighs nearly 20 pounds and requires considerable upper body strength to maneuver effectively. Hours are spent learning to use the shield, not just for defense, but as an offensive weapon, capable of stunning or unbalancing an opponent. The fighting stance must be low and stable, prepared to absorb powerful attacks while looking for opportunities to strike with the gladius. The gladius itself is a marvel of engineering, perfectly balanced for close quarters combat. Its short length makes it ideal for thrusting attacks, while the double-edged blade can deliver devastating cuts when the opportunity arises. Training with this weapon emphasizes precision over power, as the weight of the armor makes wild swings ineffective and exhausting. The Retiarius represents the opposite extreme, speed and agility over protection and power. Armed with a weighted net, a trident, and a small dagger, the Retiarius wears minimal armor, consisting only of a shoulder, guard, and arm protector. This lack of protection makes every mistake potentially fatal, but the increased mobility allows for hit-and-run tactics impossible for heavily armored opponents. Retiarius training focuses on distance management and timing. The net, or reti, must be thrown with perfect accuracy to entangle an opponent without leaving the gladiator defenseless. The trident, with its three-pronged head, can deliver multiple wounds with a single thrust, and can also be used to control distance and prevent an opponent from closing to sword range. The dagger serves as a last resort when all other weapons have failed. The psychological aspect of Retiarius combat cannot be ignored. Fighting with minimal protection requires tremendous courage and confidence. A single mistake, one moment of hesitation, can result in immediate death. The Retiarius must develop an almost supernatural awareness of distance and timing, knowing exactly when to attack and when to retreat. Other gladiator types exist as well, each with their own specialized training regimens. The Threx carries a curved sword and small round shield, emphasizing mobility and aggression. The Hoplomachus fights with spear and shield, keeping enemies at distance while looking for opportunities to close for the kill. The Dimachorus wields two swords simultaneously, requiring ambidextrous skill and incredible coordination. Some days you spar with blunted weapons. Other days, you train with real blades. The exercises are carefully controlled, but still dangerous. Accidents happen. Broken bones, deep cuts, and infections are common. Even a small injury could mark the beginning of the end. Sparring sessions represent the closest thing to actual combat that training can provide. Two gladiators face each other with blunted weapons, attempting to score touches that would represent killing blows in real combat. These sessions are carefully monitored by the trainers, who watch for illegal techniques or excessive force that could cause serious injury. But even with supervision and dulled weapons, sparring remains dangerous. The transition from individual training to sparring reveals weaknesses that solo practice cannot address. Fighting a training post teaches technique, but fighting another human being introduces variables that no amount of individual practice can fully prepare you for. Every opponent moves differently, thinks differently, reacts differently to pressure and pain. Reading these differences and adapting quickly becomes crucial for survival. Blunted weapons still cause substantial damage. A wooden sword striking with full force can break bones, even through leather padding. Shields slam into faces, breaking noses and knocking out teeth. The bronze or iron edges of practice weapons, dulled though they may be, can still open cuts that require stitching. Each sparring session adds new bruises and wounds to the collection you're already carrying. The psychological impact of sparring cannot be understated. For many gladiators, these sessions represent their first experience of trying to kill another human being, even in practice. The moment when you realize that your opponent is genuinely trying to hurt you, and that you must respond in kind, marks a fundamental change in your relationship with violence. Some men embrace this change readily, finding a dark satisfaction in their growing skill at inflicting pain. Others struggle with the moral implications, fighting an internal battle between survival instinct and human compassion. Real blade training takes place less frequently, but with maximum intensity. These sessions use actual weapons, sharpened and deadly, under the strictest possible supervision. The purpose is to familiarize gladiators with the weight, balance, and cutting power of real weapons, while teaching the respect and caution that blunted training weapons cannot inspire. The sound of real steel cutting through air is different from wood or blunted metal. It carries a whisper of death, a promise of what awaits in the arena. The weight distribution feels different as well, requiring adjustments to techniques learned with practice weapons. Most importantly, the knowledge that a single mistake could result in permanent injury or death changes everything about how you approach the training. Medical care in the ludus ranges from basic first aid to surprisingly sophisticated surgical procedures. The gladiator school's doctor, often a Greek slave with considerable medical knowledge, understands that injured fighters represent lost investment. Simple wounds are cleaned and stitched, infections treated with whatever remedies are available. Broken bones are set and splinted, though the healing process often leaves permanent weakness or deformity. But medical care comes with a price. Time spent recovering from injury is time not spent training, and gladiators who cannot train cannot fight. Extended recovery periods might mean missing scheduled arena appearances, representing lost revenue for the lanista, and potentially fatal gaps in training for the gladiator. The pressure to return to training before injuries are fully healed creates a cycle of re-injury and chronic pain that follows many gladiators throughout their careers. The afternoon brings a brief pause, enough time to sit on the ground, drink water that tastes faintly of clay, and stretch your aching muscles. But rest does not last. The midday break serves multiple purposes beyond simple rest. It allows trainers to assess the morning's progress, noting which gladiators are developing properly and which need additional attention. It provides an opportunity for the ludus doctor to examine new injuries and tend to existing wounds. Most importantly, it prevents complete exhaustion that could lead to serious training accidents or permanent injury. The water served during break time comes from the same wells that supply the morning meal, carrying the same earthy taste that speaks of its journey through stone and metal pipes. But to sweat-soaked, exhausted gladiators, it might as well be the finest wine. The body's need for hydration in the Mediterranean heat makes every drop precious, and the knowledge that water will be available provides psychological comfort during the most grueling training sessions. Stretching becomes both necessity and ritual during these brief respites. Muscles cramped from hours of repetitive motion must be coaxed back to flexibility. Joints stiffened by constant impact need gentle encouragement to maintain their range of motion. Stretching routines develop organically, passed down from veteran gladiators to newcomers, evolving to address the specific physical demands of each fighting style. These quiet moments also provide opportunities for conversation, though such interactions remain carefully guarded. Gladiators share information about techniques they've discovered, warn each other about the preferences of particular trainers, or simply enjoy brief moments of human connection in an environment designed to strip away humanity. Friendships formed during these interludes often prove more valuable than any formal training, as experienced fighters pass along survival wisdom that no trainer would ever share. After lunch, training continues, this time focusing on stamina and endurance. Running laps, lifting weights made of stone, dragging heavy sleds across the yard, always moving, always pushing your body past the point of exhaustion. Endurance training represents perhaps the most brutal aspect of gladiator preparation. Combat in the arena can last for extended periods, especially when the crowd demands entertainment value over quick resolution. A gladiator who cannot maintain strength and coordination throughout a prolonged battle is a dead gladiator, regardless of his technical skill with weapons. Running laps around the training yard serves multiple purposes. It builds cardiovascular endurance essential for sustained combat. The soft sand surface strengthens the small stabilizing muscles in the feet and legs, reducing the risk of injury during combat. The repetitive nature of the exercise builds mental toughness, teaching gladiators to push through physical discomfort and maintain focus despite exhaustion. The stone weights used for strength training are crude but effective. Carved from local rock and shaped into manageable forms, they provide resistance training that builds the specific muscle groups most important for gladiatorial combat. Upper body exercises focus on the shoulders, arms, and back muscles needed for sword work and shield manipulation. Lower body training emphasizes the legs and core muscles essential for maintaining balance and generating power in attacks. The heavy sleds represent perhaps the most dreaded element of endurance training. Loaded with stone blocks and attached to harnesses that gladiators must wear, these devices create resistance that makes every step a struggle. Dragging the sleds across the sand builds leg strength while simultaneously challenging cardiovascular systems pushed to their limits. The psychological challenge of continuing to move forward when every muscle screams for rest teaches the mental discipline needed to fight through pain and exhaustion in the arena. And all the while, one thought lingers in your mind. This is not just training for strength. It is training for survival. The knowledge that every repetition, every moment of pain, every drop of sweat represents preparation for mortal combat gives weight to even the most mundane training exercises. The wooden sword in your hand is practice for the steel blade that will soon take its place. The bruises earned in sparring are preparation for wounds that might prove fatal. The endurance built through exhausting drills might provide the extra seconds needed to deliver a killing blow when death stalks the arena sand. This awareness changes everything about how you approach training. Each movement becomes more deliberate, more focused. Mistakes that might be laughed off in other contexts become serious concerns, potential weaknesses that an opponent might exploit. The casual attitude toward physical training that might characterize other athletic endeavors has no place here, where the stakes are measured in life and death rather than simple victory or defeat. The competitive nature of gladiator training adds another layer of psychological pressure. You train alongside men who might become your opponents in the arena. Every technique you master is observed by potential enemies who will use that knowledge against you. Every weakness you display becomes intelligence that could contribute to your eventual defeat. The paranoid atmosphere this creates affects every aspect of life in the ludus, making trust a dangerous luxury and friendship a potentially fatal weakness. Beyond the walls of the ludus, crowds gather in Rome's amphitheaters. They cheer for violence. They chant for blood. Soon you will stand before them. The knowledge of what awaits beyond the training grounds haunts every gladiator's thoughts. The roar of the crowd that echoes faintly through the ludus walls during major arena events serves as a constant reminder of your ultimate destination. These sounds represent both promise and threat, the promise of glory for those who fight well, and the threat of death for those who disappoint the masses. The amphitheaters themselves are marvels of engineering, designed specifically to optimize the viewing experience for thousands of spectators. The elliptical shape ensures that no seat is too far from the action, while the tiered seating arrangement provides clear sightlines for every observer. The arena floor, covered in the same sand that fills your training yard, can be flooded for naval battles or filled with elaborate set pieces for dramatic presentations. But for the gladiator, these architectural wonders represent something far more ominous. The high walls that prevent escape, the underground passages that hide the mechanisms of death, the holding cells where fighters wait for their names to be called. Every aspect of the amphitheater's design serves to remind gladiators of their status as entertainers first and human beings second. The crowds that fill these venues come seeking spectacle, and they are rarely disappointed. Wealthy Romans view gladiatorial games as sophisticated entertainment, appreciating the skill and technique displayed by trained fighters. The common people see them as exciting diversions from the hardships of daily life, opportunities to experience vicarious thrills through the combat of others. Both groups share an appetite for violence that gladiators must satisfy or face the consequences. The social dynamics of the arena create complex relationships between fighters and spectators. Popular gladiators can achieve a form of celebrity status, their names chanted by adoring crowds, their fighting styles copied by aspiring warriors. But this fame comes at a price, as beloved fighters face increasing pressure to provide ever more spectacular performances, often leading to increasingly dangerous combat scenarios. As the sun sets, the air cools, but your body still radiates heat from the day's work. The evening meal offers more of the same. More grains, perhaps a few beans, but rarely any meat. Protein is a luxury reserved for others. The evening meal provides little respite from the monotony of gladiator nutrition. The same grains that fueled your morning training return to fuel your recovery, prepared with minimal variation in recipe or presentation. The cooks, typically slaves themselves, work with whatever ingredients the ludus management provides, creating meals designed for function rather than flavor. The absence of meat from the gladiator diet reflects both economic and practical considerations. Meat represents expensive nutrition that the ludus owners are reluctant to provide, especially given the uncertain survival prospects of their fighters. The high carbohydrate diet serves its purpose of building protective body fat while requiring minimal investment in premium ingredients. Occasionally, special circumstances might warrant improved nutrition. Gladiators preparing for particularly important arena events might receive additional rations or even small portions of meat to ensure peak physical condition. Veterans with proven arena records might earn dietary privileges as rewards for their service and success. But these exceptions highlight the general scarcity rather than contradicting it. The communal nature of the evening meal creates its own social dynamics. Men tired from training gather around rough wooden tables, sharing not just their food, but their thoughts about the day's events. Conversations range from technical discussions about fighting techniques to whispered rumors about upcoming arena schedules. The sharing of information becomes a form of currency, as knowledge about opponents, arena conditions, or lanista preferences can mean the difference between life and death. After eating, some men sit in small groups, sharpening weapons, wrapping wounds, staring quietly at the fading sky. Others whisper prayers to their gods, hoping for strength, mercy, or a quick end when the time comes. The evening hours after training represent the most human moments in the gladiator's day. Free from the immediate demands of combat preparation, men can engage in activities that remind them of their humanity rather than their function as entertainment for others. These quiet pursuits serve both practical and psychological purposes, maintaining the skills and spiritual practices that help them survive the harsh realities of their situation. Weapon maintenance becomes both necessity and meditation. The wooden practice weapons used in training require constant attention to remain safe and effective. Handles must be re-wrapped when the cord becomes loose or frayed. Edges need reshaping when repeated impacts cause splintering or damage. The careful, methodical work of maintaining equipment provides a sense of control in an environment where gladiators have little influence over their own fate. For those who have progressed to training with real weapons, the maintenance requirements become even more critical. Steel blades require regular sharpening to maintain their effectiveness, but the process must be carefully controlled to prevent weapons from becoming too sharp for safe training use. The balance between maintaining weapon effectiveness and preventing training accidents requires skill and judgment that develop only through experience. Wound care occupies much of the evening time for many gladiators. The day's training inevitably produces new injuries that must be cleaned and dressed to prevent infection. The communal nature of wound care creates bonds between fighters, as men help each other reach injuries in difficult locations or share knowledge about effective treatments. These moments of mutual assistance provide some of the strongest foundations for friendship in an environment that otherwise discourages emotional connections. The religious practices observed in the evening reveal the diverse backgrounds of the gladiator population. Roman gods share space with Germanic deities, Egyptian spirits, and Eastern mystery religions. Prayer beads carved from bone or wood move between fingers, worn calloused by weapon grips. Whispered invocations rise toward stars barely visible through the smoke and dust that hangs over the ludus. Some men pray for strength in the coming battles, asking their gods to guide their weapons and protect them from their enemies. Others seek mercy, hoping for opponents who will grant them quick deaths if defeat becomes inevitable. The wisest pray for courage, knowing that fear can kill a gladiator faster than any weapon. These evening prayers provide psychological armor against the terror that stalks every moment of arena combat. The fading sky serves as a reminder of the world beyond the ludus walls, a world that most gladiators will never see again. The colors of sunset, the flight of birds returning to their roosts, the distant sounds of the city settling into evening routines all speak of freedoms lost and lives abandoned. Some men find comfort in these glimpses of the larger world, while others find them too painful to contemplate. Sleep arrives easily for some, from sheer exhaustion. For others, it remains elusive. The mind restless with thoughts of sand, steel, and the roar of the crowd. Physical exhaustion from intense training should guarantee restful sleep, but the psychological pressures of gladiatorial life often prevent the mind from achieving the peace necessary for true rest. Bodies worn down by hours of combat training collapse onto their thin mats, but minds continue racing with thoughts of the battles to come. Dreams, when they come, often blur the line between memory and anticipation. Former soldiers relive battles from their military service, but now the enemies wear the faces of their training partners. Men who never held weapons before their capture experience vivid nightmares of arena combat, their unconscious minds trying to prepare for experiences their waking selves have never endured. The sounds of the ludus at night create their own psychological challenges. The groans of men shifting on hard surfaces, the whispered prayers and quiet conversations, the distant sounds of the city beyond the walls, all combine to create an atmosphere of constant low-level stress. Sleep, when it finally comes, is often light and easily disturbed, leaving gladiators tired despite having spent hours in bed. Some men develop rituals to help them achieve sleep despite the challenging circumstances. Mental exercises that focus attention away from fears about the future. Physical relaxation techniques learned from other gladiators or half remembered from earlier lives. Simple breathing patterns that slow the heart rate and calm the mind enough to permit rest. The quality of sleep affects everything about a gladiator's performance. Men who cannot rest properly struggle with coordination and reflexes during training. Their decision-making suffers under stress, making them more likely to make fatal mistakes in combat. The lanista and trainers recognize this connection, sometimes adjusting training schedules or sleeping arrangements to ensure that their most valuable fighters get adequate rest. And tomorrow, it begins again. The cyclical nature of gladiator training creates a psychological trap as inescapable as the physical walls of the ludus. Each day brings the same routine. Awakening before dawn, basic meals, hours of brutal training, brief rest periods, more training, evening meals, and finally sleep that may or may not come. This repetition serves practical purposes in building physical conditioning and muscle memory, but it also breaks down individual will and resistance to the system. The sameness of each day makes time seem to stretch endlessly, while simultaneously making the weeks and months blur together in memory. New gladiators often count days obsessively, trying to maintain some sense of connection to their previous lives and hope for eventual freedom. Veterans learn to stop counting, recognizing that such mental exercises only increase suffering without changing circumstances. Yet within this repetitive framework, small variations take on enormous significance. A particularly challenging training session, a minor injury that changes routine, news from the arena about other gladiators, all become major events in lives stripped of normal human experiences and choices. The mental conditioning that results from this routine is as important as the physical training. Men learn to function despite pain, fear, and exhaustion. They develop the ability to compartmentalize emotions that might interfere with survival. Most importantly, they learn to accept their circumstances while maintaining the spark of aggression needed for effective combat. But acceptance comes at a cost. Many gladiators describe a gradual numbing of emotional responses, a detachment from their own humanity that makes the violence of arena combat psychologically tolerable. This emotional armor protects the mind from experiences that might otherwise drive men to madness, but it also separates them from the very humanity they're fighting to preserve. A life of repetition, preparation, and waiting. The waiting might be the cruelest aspect of gladiatorial existence. Unlike soldiers who know they march toward specific battles, or criminals who serve defined sentences, gladiators exist in a state of perpetual uncertainty. They know that arena combat awaits, but not when, not against whom, and not under what circumstances. This uncertainty affects every aspect of daily life. Relationships remain tentative, because training partners might become opponents without warning. Long-term planning becomes impossible when death could arrive at any moment. Even simple pleasures like friendship or learning new skills carry the weight of potential futility. The waiting also creates a strange paradox in gladiator psychology. Men simultaneously hope for and dread their arena debuts. The combat represents the culmination of their training, a moment when months of preparation will be tested against reality. But it also represents the moment when abstract training becomes concrete violence, when practice weapons give way to instruments of death. Veteran gladiators often describe the period before their first arena combat as the most psychologically challenging of their careers. The unknown factors seem infinite. The reactions of the crowd, the behavior of opponents, the feel of real weapons in mortal combat. Imagination fills the void left by inexperience, often creating fears worse than reality. But for others, the waiting becomes a form of mental torture more cruel than any physical punishment. The knowledge that each day might be their last creates a psychological pressure that some minds cannot bear. These men often perform poorly in their arena debuts, not from lack of physical preparation, but from mental collapse under the weight of prolonged anticipation, waiting for the day when your name will be called, when you will step out beneath the blinding sun to face another man. Or perhaps something far more dangerous. The arena schedule operates according to rhythms beyond gladiator control. Religious festivals, political celebrations, imperial birthdays, military victories, all create occasions for public games that require gladiatorial entertainment. The gladiators themselves learn of their participation only days or sometimes hours before combat, leaving little time for specific preparation or mental adjustment. The selection process for arena events reflects the economic calculations that drive the gladiatorial system. Newer, less experienced fighters often face each other in preliminary matches designed to test their skills and entertainment value. Veterans with proven crowd appeal command higher fees and more prominent positions on the program. The most skilled and popular gladiators might fight only a few times per year, their scarcity increasing their value as entertainment commodities. When your name finally appears on the arena roster, everything changes. Training shifts from general conditioning to specific preparation for your assigned opponent and combat scenario. The Ludus medical staff examines you more carefully, ensuring that you're physically capable of providing good entertainment value. Even your diet might change slightly, with additional nutrition designed to optimize your appearance and performance for the paying audience. The psychological impact of receiving your arena assignment cannot be overstated. Abstract preparation becomes concrete reality. The training post that served as your opponent for months of preparation gives way to a specific human being with his own skills, experience, and desire to survive. Sleep becomes even more elusive as your mind races through combat scenarios and strategic possibilities. But perhaps most unsettling is the knowledge that your combat might not be against another gladiator at all. Arena programs often include beast hunts, where gladiators face lions, bears, or other dangerous animals. These contests require different skills and strategies than human combat, and the outcome often depends as much on luck as on training. The beasts feel no fear, show no mercy, and cannot be intimidated or psychologically manipulated. The blinding sun mentioned represents more than just a physical challenge. Arena combat typically takes place during the hottest part of the day, when the Mediterranean sun beats down mercilessly on the sand-covered fighting surface. The heat affects everything. Weapon grips become slippery with sweat. Armor feels like furnaces against the skin, and dehydration becomes a constant concern. But the sun also serves symbolic purposes in gladiatorial combat. The brightness forces fighters to consider positioning and timing in ways that training in the shaded Ludus cannot fully prepare them for. Gladiators must learn to use the sun as both weapon and shield, positioning themselves so that opponents face the glare while keeping their own vision clear. The psychological impact of stepping from the dim holding areas beneath the arena into the blazing sunlight of the combat space cannot be underestimated. The sudden transition from darkness to brilliant light can be disorienting, leaving fighters temporarily vulnerable at the crucial moment when combat begins. Experienced gladiators learn to prepare for this transition, but it remains one of the many factors that can influence the outcome of arena combat. But that story belongs to another time. The promise of future revelation serves to maintain audience engagement, while acknowledging that the current narrative focuses on training rather than combat. This transition recognizes that gladiatorial experience encompasses multiple phases, each with its own challenges and characteristics. The training phase, detailed extensively above, represents only the beginning of the gladiatorial journey. The arena phase, hinted at but not explored, would reveal how training translates into actual combat performance. The crowd dynamics, the political implications of gladiatorial games, the economic factors that drive the entire system, all represent additional layers of complexity that extend beyond the Ludus walls. Some gladiators never progress beyond the training phase, succumbing to injury, illness, or psychological breakdown before they ever face arena combat. Others survive multiple arena appearances, developing reputations and skills that elevate them above their peers. A few achieve the ultimate goal of gladiatorial life, earning enough money and popularity to purchase their freedom and escape the system entirely. For now, let's gently leave the training yards behind and drift toward the tale of one gladiator who refused to accept his fate. This transition serves multiple narrative purposes. It provides closure to the detailed examination of training life while promising new developments that will expand the story in different directions. The gentle tone contrasts with the harsh realities just described, offering readers a moment of respite before the next phase of the narrative. The phrase "refused to accept his fate" immediately establishes the character, who will dominate the next section as someone fundamentally different from the typical gladiator. While most men in the ludus eventually accept their circumstances and focus on survival within the system, this individual represents rebellion against the very foundations of gladiatorial existence. The transition also creates anticipation by suggesting that the story will shift from general description to specific character focus. Readers who have absorbed the detailed background about gladiatorial training are now prepared to understand the significance of one man's decision to challenge the system that enslaves him. A man named Spartacus. The name alone carries enormous historical weight, representing one of the most significant challenges to Roman authority in the Republic's history. For readers familiar with the historical Spartacus, this introduction promises to explore the personal journey that led from gladiatorial training to open rebellion. For those unfamiliar with the story, the name serves as a dramatic conclusion to the training narrative and introduction to what promises to be an even more compelling tale of resistance and revolt. The simplicity of this final line contrasts sharply with the detailed complexity of the training description that precedes it. After thousands of words exploring the mundane brutality of daily gladiatorial life, the story pivots toward the extraordinary actions of one exceptional individual. This stylistic shift reflects the transition from general experience to specific historical narrative, from background to foreground, from preparation to action. The placement of Spartacus's name at the very end of this section serves as a cliffhanger, promising readers that the next portion of the narrative will explore how one man's refusal to accept his circumstances led to events that shook the Roman world. It transforms the preceding description from mere historical background into the foundation for understanding one of history's most dramatic stories of resistance against oppression. Let your mind settle now as we shift from the daily grind of gladiator life to one of the most famous moments of resistance in Roman history, the story of Spartacus. Imagine yourself in the Italian countryside. The year is 73 BCE. The Roman Republic is strong, its armies vast and experienced. But deep in the heart of this republic, trouble is quietly brewing inside a gladiator school in Capua, not far from Naples. The ludus of Lentulus Batiatus sits like a fortress in the Campanian countryside, its high walls casting long shadows across the surrounding vineyards and olive groves. From the outside, it appears unremarkable, just another wealthy Roman's estate dotted across the fertile landscape south of Rome. But within those walls, hundreds of men live and train under conditions that would break lesser spirits. The smell of sweat and leather mingles with the dust kicked up by countless feet, creating an atmosphere thick with desperation and barely contained violence. Capua itself is a city of contradictions. Once the greatest city in southern Italy, rivaling Rome in power and influence, it had fallen from grace after backing Hannibal during the Second Punic War. Now it serves as a reminder of what happens to those who challenge Roman authority, its former glory reduced to a cautionary tale told in whispers. Yet it remains prosperous, its location on the Via Appia making it a crucial waypoint for trade between Rome and the Greek cities of the south. The gladiator schools clustered around Capua benefit from this strategic position. Wealthy Romans travel south to observe the training, making investments in promising fighters, or simply enjoying the spectacle of men preparing for death. The schools compete with each other for prestige and profit, each lanista claiming to produce the finest warriors, the most entertaining combatants, the most reliable investments for those seeking to sponsor arena games. But beneath this veneer of civilized entertainment lies a brutal truth that few Romans care to acknowledge. The gladiators themselves see their situation with crystal clarity. They are property valuable only as long as they can provide entertainment through their suffering and death. No amount of skill or courage can guarantee freedom. No victory ensures survival. They exist solely for the pleasure of others, their humanity stripped away as completely as their legal rights. Spartacus is not Ramon. He was born in Thrace, a region north of Greece, in what is today part of Bulgaria and Turkey. A rugged land of mountains and warriors. Little is known about his early life. Some accounts suggest he may have served as a soldier in the Roman army at one point, captured later, and sold into slavery. What we do know is that by his early adulthood, Spartacus was property, a man owned by another, forced into training as a gladiator at the ludus of Lentulus Batiatus in Capua. Thrace in the 1st century BCE was a land caught between empires, its fierce warrior culture constantly challenged by the expanding influence of Rome and the declining power of the Greek city-states. The Thracian tribes had a reputation for producing exceptional fighters, men who combined natural aggression with tactical intelligence honed by generations of mountain warfare. Their weapons were different from Roman equipment, their fighting styles adapted to the rocky terrain and harsh climate of their homeland. The Romans both feared and admired Thracian military prowess. Many Thracian warriors served as auxiliaries in Roman armies, their knowledge of guerrilla tactics and mountain warfare proving invaluable in campaigns across the empire. But this relationship was always uneasy, built on necessity rather than trust. Romans viewed Thracians as useful barbarians, skilled in violence, but lacking the civilization that supposedly justified Roman dominance. For a Thracian warrior like Spartacus, service in the Roman army would have been a complex experience. He would have learned Roman military tactics, studied their organization and discipline, observed their strengths and weaknesses from within their own ranks. This knowledge would prove invaluable later, but the experience itself must have been deeply alienating. To fight for an empire that viewed you as inherently inferior, to risk your life for a system that would never fully accept you as an equal, creates psychological tensions that few men can bear indefinitely. The transition from soldier to slave represents one of the cruelest ironies of Roman society. A man who had served Rome faithfully, who had risked his life for Roman interests, could find himself reduced to property through the fortunes of war or the machinations of politics. Former soldiers often made the most dangerous gladiators because they understood both the techniques of warfare and the hypocrisy of the system that enslaved them. Spartacus would have arrived at the ludus of Lentulus Batiatus in chains, his warrior's pride intact, but his freedom stripped away. The initial shock of enslavement affects different men in different ways. Some break immediately, their spirits crushed by the magnitude of their fall from respected warrior to entertainment commodity. Others retreat into themselves, becoming mechanically proficient at their training, while nurturing internal fires of rage and resentment. But Spartacus belonged to a third category, the most dangerous from a Roman perspective. He accepted his circumstances without accepting his fate, studying the system that imprisoned him, while quietly preparing for the opportunity to strike back. His military experience gave him advantages that most gladiators lacked: an understanding of logistics, strategy, and the psychological factors that determine victory or defeat in large-scale combat. Life there was harsh. The same brutal routine we've just imagined. Day after day of training, with no promise of freedom and no guarantee of survival. The air thick with dust. The clatter of wooden swords on shields. The steady rhythm of drills. The ludus of Lentulus Batiatus operated like dozens of similar schools throughout the Roman world. but its proximity to Capua and the major trade routes made it particularly prominent. Batiatus himself was a typical lanista, a businessman who saw gladiators as investments to be maximized through careful training and strategic deployment. His wealth came from the suffering of others, but Roman society not only accepted this arrangement, but celebrated it as a legitimate form of entertainment and commerce. The daily routine at Batiatus's school followed the same patterns described earlier, but with additional pressures that reflected its high profile and wealthy clientele. Visiting Romans expected to see impressive displays of skill and ferocity, creating pressure on the trainers to push their gladiators harder and faster than might be optimal for long-term survival. The school's reputation depended on producing spectacular arena performances, which often meant sacrificing gladiator welfare for entertainment value. Spartacus would have excelled in this environment, his military background giving him advantages over gladiators who came from other backgrounds. His understanding of weapons and tactics, combined with his physical conditioning and mental toughness, would have marked him as a promising investment. But this success came at a psychological cost that his owners never considered. Every skill he mastered, every technique he perfected, increased his value as entertainment property, while simultaneously fueling his resentment at being reduced to such a status. The social dynamics within the ludus created additional pressures that few outsiders understood. Gladiators came from dozens of different cultures and backgrounds, speaking different languages and following different customs. Romans, Gauls, Germans, Thracians, Africans, Greeks, all thrown together in circumstances that made trust difficult and friendship dangerous. Natural leaders like Spartacus gradually attracted followers, but building a cohesive group required overcoming enormous cultural and linguistic barriers. The training itself served multiple purposes beyond simple combat preparation. It broke down individual identity and rebuilt men as components of an entertainment system. The repetitive drills, the harsh discipline, the constant threat of punishment, all worked to create psychological dependence on the system that enslaved them. Most gladiators eventually accepted their circumstances because the alternative seemed impossible to imagine. But for men like Spartacus, who retained clear memories of freedom and possessed the intellectual tools to analyze their situation, the training served a different purpose. Every lesson in combat technique became preparation for potential rebellion. Every drill that taught teamwork could be applied to organizing resistance. Every moment of enforced cooperation built networks that might someday be turned against their oppressors. But Spartacus had no intention of dying for the entertainment of Roman crowds. This simple statement encapsulates the fundamental difference between Spartacus and most other gladiators. While others focused on survival within the system, hoping to live long enough to win freedom through arena success, Spartacus rejected the entire framework that made such choices necessary. He refused to accept that his life should be measured by his ability to entertain Roman audiences through violence and death. The psychological preparation for rebellion requires a different mindset than preparation for gladiatorial success. A gladiator trains to defeat individual opponents under controlled circumstances, with rules and referees and crowds that can influence outcomes. A rebel leader must think in terms of military campaigns, logistics, strategy, and the complex political factors that determine the success or failure of armed resistance. Spartacus possessed advantages that made such thinking possible. His military experience provided understanding of how armies function, how supply lines work, how terrain affects combat operations. His cultural background as a Thracian gave him knowledge of guerrilla warfare and mountain fighting that most Romans lacked. His intelligence allowed him to see beyond immediate circumstances to larger possibilities and consequences. But perhaps most importantly, Spartacus retained something that the gladiatorial system was designed to destroy: a sense of personal dignity that could not be compromised by circumstances. Roman slavery was intended to break the spirit as well as the body, to reduce human beings to tools that would function efficiently without question or resistance. For most slaves, this psychological conditioning eventually succeeded, creating individuals who defined themselves entirely in terms of their usefulness to their masters. Spartacus never accepted this redefinition of his humanity. In his mind, he remained a warrior temporarily constrained by circumstances, rather than a slave permanently defined by his status. This distinction made all the difference when the opportunity for action finally presented itself. In the late summer of that year, a small group of gladiators made a decision. Enough was enough. Armed with kitchen utensils, makeshift clubs, and stolen weapons, they overpowered the guards of the ludus. The breakout began as little more than a desperate dash for freedom. The decision to rebel was not made lightly or spontaneously. Such actions require careful planning, trusted allies, and favorable circumstances that might not occur again for months or years. The gladiators involved in the initial breakout had been observing and preparing for their opportunity, studying guard routines, identifying weaknesses in the ludus security, and building the networks of trust necessary for coordinated action. The choice of weapons reveals both the desperation and the resourcefulness of the conspirators. Kitchen knives, meat cleavers, iron spits used for roasting, wooden clubs fashioned from training equipment, anything that could serve as a weapon in the hands of men trained to kill. The gladiators knew that once they committed to rebellion, there could be no retreat, no negotiation, no mercy from their former captors. They would win their freedom or die in the attempt. The timing of the breakout reflected careful calculation of multiple factors. Late summer provided optimal weather for movement through the countryside, crops ready for harvest, and numerous opportunities for resupply. The Roman military was engaged in various campaigns across the empire, reducing the forces immediately available for suppressing local rebellions. Most importantly, the gladiator training schedule created predictable routines that could be exploited by those who understood the patterns. The initial assault on the guards required split-second timing and absolute commitment from all participants. Guards in gladiator schools were typically well-armed and experienced fighters themselves, often retired soldiers or gladiators who had won their freedom. They understood the desperation of their charges and maintained constant vigilance against exactly this type of outbreak. Overcoming them required surprise, coordination, and the willingness to inflict lethal violence without hesitation. The makeshift weapons proved surprisingly effective in the hands of men trained to kill. A kitchen knife becomes deadly when wielded by someone who understands anatomy and leverage. A wooden club can crush skulls when swung by arms, developed through years of weapon training. The gladiators' combat skills, intended to entertain Roman audiences, now served their own cause of liberation. The psychological moment of transition from slave to rebel cannot be underestimated. For years, these men had suppressed their natural aggressive instincts, channeling their violence into controlled performances designed to please others. The moment they turned their weapons against their captors, they reclaimed agency over their own lives and deaths. This transformation from entertainment commodity to armed enemy happened in seconds, but its psychological impact lasted for the remainder of their lives. About 70 men fled together. Spartacus quickly emerged as one of their leaders. His experience and natural command earned him their trust. They raided wagons and outposts, gathering real weapons, and sought shelter on Mount Vesuvius. The number of initial escapees reflects both the careful planning involved and the limitations of the conspiracy. 70 men represented a significant portion of the gladiators housed at the ludus, suggesting that the rebellion had broad support among the enslaved fighters. But it also indicates that not every gladiator chose to participate, either from fear, loyalty to their captors, or simple resignation to their fate. The emergence of Spartacus as a leader was not automatic or uncontested. Among 70 escaped gladiators, many possessed combat experience and leadership qualities. The group included men from various cultures and backgrounds, each with their own ideas about strategy and objectives. Natural hierarchies had to be established quickly. often through demonstrations of tactical intelligence and personal courage that convinced others to follow. Spartacus's military background gave him crucial advantages in this leadership competition. While other gladiators thought in terms of individual combat, Spartacus understood group tactics, logistics, and the strategic considerations that would determine their long-term survival. His ability to think beyond immediate circumstances to larger possibilities marked him as someone who might actually lead them to freedom rather than simply to glorious death. The decision to raid wagons and outposts demonstrated sophisticated strategic thinking that went beyond simple banditry. The escapees needed weapons, armor, supplies, and horses to transform themselves from fugitive slaves into an effective fighting force. Random attacks would have provided some resources while alerting Roman authorities to their presence and capabilities. Targeted raids on specific objectives showed planning and intelligence that Romans had not expected from escaped gladiators. The choice of Mount Vesuvius as a refuge location revealed intimate knowledge of local geography and tactical considerations. The volcano provided natural defensive advantages, steep slopes that would slow pursuing forces, multiple escape routes through difficult terrain, and elevated positions that allowed observation of Roman movements in the surrounding countryside. The mountain also offered resources necessary for survival: fresh water, shelter from weather, and access to the rural communities where additional recruits might be found. Vesuvius in 73 BC was not the active, smoking volcano that would destroy Pompeii and Herculaneum 6 years later. Instead, it appeared to be a dormant mountain with fertile slopes covered in vineyards and farms. This apparent tranquility made it seem like an ideal hideout, while the underlying volcanic activity that would soon prove so destructive remained hidden beneath the surface. The irony of this choice would not become apparent until much later. From the slopes of the volcano, they watched the Roman forces begin to gather. The local militia, underestimating the escaped slaves, assumed it would be an easy capture. But Spartacus had other plans. The Roman response to the initial breakout reflected the same arrogance and complacency that characterized much of the Republic's approach to internal security. Local magistrates and military commanders viewed escaped slaves as a police matter rather than a military threat, dispatching militia forces adequate for capturing ordinary criminals, but insufficient for confronting trained warriors fighting for their freedom. This underestimation was both natural and catastrophic. Roman society was built on the assumption that slaves would remain passive and obedient, accepting their status as the natural order of things. The possibility that enslaved gladiators might organize effective military resistance simply did not fit Roman worldview. They had conquered most of the known world through military excellence, but their success bred overconfidence that blinded them to emerging threats. The militia forces sent to capture the escaped gladiators consisted primarily of local citizens with minimal military training and equipment. These men were farmers, merchants, and craftsmen who served part-time military duties in exchange for citizenship privileges. They were adequate for maintaining local order and suppressing minor disturbances, but they lacked the experience and discipline necessary for confronting desperate fighters who had nothing left to lose. From their elevated position on Vesuvius, Spartacus and his followers could observe Roman movements throughout the surrounding countryside. They watched the militia units march out from Capua and other nearby towns, noted their routes and camping procedures, and identified weaknesses in their organization and deployment. This intelligence advantage would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. The Romans approached the situation with typical methodical efficiency, establishing camps around the base of the mountain and preparing for what they assumed would be a brief siege. Their plan was simple: surround the escaped slaves, cut off their access to supplies and reinforcements, and force them to surrender or attempt a desperate breakout that could be easily crushed by superior numbers and equipment. But Spartacus had studied Roman military tactics during his own service in their armies. He understood their strengths and weaknesses, their standard procedures, and likely responses to various situations. Most importantly, he recognized that Roman confidence could be turned into a weapon against them if he could devise tactics that exploited their assumptions and expectations. Using vines and branches, the fugitives crafted ropes to descend the steep cliffs of Vesuvius under cover of darkness. When the Romans encamped below least expected it, the gladiators struck. Quick, organized, relentless. The Roman militia was caught off guard and routed. The construction of rope ladders from natural materials demonstrated both the resourcefulness and the tactical intelligence of the escaped gladiators. Vines growing on the volcanic slopes provided strong, flexible material that could support human weight when properly braided and secured. Branches offered structural support and anchor points for the improvised climbing equipment. This work required both physical skill and engineering knowledge that went far beyond what Romans expected from escaped slaves. The descent itself required extraordinary courage and coordination. The cliffs of Vesuvius are steep and treacherous, even in daylight, with loose rock and unstable footing that can send climbers plummeting to their deaths. Attempting such a maneuver in darkness, carrying weapons and equipment, while maintaining silence necessary for surprise, pushed human capabilities to their limits. The timing of the attack reflected sophisticated understanding of Roman military routine and psychology. The gladiators waited until the militia forces had settled into their evening camps, posted guards, and begun to relax after what they assumed would be the first day of a routine siege operation. Roman soldiers were trained to expect attacks during certain times and from certain directions. A midnight assault from the supposedly inaccessible rear caught them completely unprepared. The gladiators' approach to the actual combat revealed how their arena training translated into military effectiveness. They moved quietly through the Roman camp, striking sentries and key personnel before raising any general alarm. Their weapons work was precise and lethal, designed to kill quickly and silently, rather than provide entertaining spectacle. The psychological shock of discovering that their quarry had somehow appeared behind them shattered Roman morale before the real fighting even began. When the main assault began, the Romans found themselves facing opponents who combined gladiatorial combat skills with military tactical knowledge and the desperate motivation of men fighting for their freedom. The militia, expecting to face panicked runaway slaves, instead confronted organized warriors who fought with coordinated tactics and superior individual skills. The result was inevitable: complete Roman defeat and retreat. The victory gave Spartacus and his followers more than just confidence. It provided them with additional weapons, armor, and horses. The small band of gladiators became a growing force. Word spread quickly across the countryside. Slaves from farms, mines, and workshops began to run away and join the rebellion. Within weeks, their numbers swelled into the thousands. The capture of Roman military equipment transformed the escaped gladiators from refugees into a legitimate military force. Standard Roman weapons and armor were superior to the makeshift equipment they had been using, while captured horses provided mobility that would prove crucial in future operations. More importantly, the victory demonstrated that Roman forces could be defeated, shattering the myth of invincibility that helped maintain social order throughout the empire. News of the victory spread through the underground networks that connected slave communities throughout southern Italy. Slaves developed their own communication systems, passing information through markets, festivals, and the movement of people between estates and communities. Word of Spartacus's success reached slaves hundreds of miles away within days, carrying both factual information and the hope that successful resistance was possible. The decision to join the rebellion required enormous courage from slaves in other circumstances. Agricultural slaves, mine workers, household servants, and others faced the choice between the security of familiar bondage and the dangerous uncertainty of armed resistance. Those who chose rebellion abandoned not just their owners, but often their families, friends, and the only homes they had known for years or decades. The growing numbers brought both opportunities and challenges for Spartacus and his original followers. Each new recruit increased their military strength while simultaneously complicating their organization and supply requirements. Men and women from different backgrounds brought various skills and knowledge, but they also brought conflicting expectations about objectives and methods that would eventually threaten the unity of the movement. The transformation from a small band of escaped gladiators to a mass movement of thousands occurred with breathtaking speed. Within weeks, Spartacus found himself commanding a force larger than many Roman legions, responsible for feeding, housing, and organizing people who looked to him for leadership and salvation. This rapid growth tested his leadership abilities in ways that gladiatorial training and military service had never prepared him for. The composition of the growing rebel army reflected the diversity of Roman slavery itself. Gladiators formed the core of experienced fighters, but they were joined by agricultural workers who knew the countryside intimately, household slaves who understood Roman customs and psychology, skilled craftsmen who could maintain equipment and create new weapons, and even some free citizens who sympathized with the cause or saw opportunities for personal advancement. Spartacus proved to be more than just a fighter. He was a strategist. Rather than march blindly toward Rome, he led his growing army through the countryside, avoiding direct confrontation with large Roman legions while gathering supplies and recruits. The strategic wisdom displayed by Spartacus during this phase of the rebellion revealed military intelligence that went far beyond what most Romans expected from a former gladiator. Instead of allowing emotion and revenge to drive his decisions, he calculated the relative strengths and weaknesses of his position with the cold logic of an experienced commander. This analytical approach gave the rebellion its best chance for long-term success. The decision to avoid immediate confrontation with major Roman forces demonstrated understanding of the fundamental imbalance between the rebels and their enemies. While Spartacus commanded growing numbers of motivated fighters, the Romans possessed professional legions with superior equipment, training, and logistical support. Direct battles against such forces would likely result in defeat, regardless of the rebels' courage and determination. The strategy of movement through the countryside served multiple purposes simultaneously. It kept the rebel army ahead of Roman pursuit while allowing them to recruit additional followers from rural slave populations. The constant movement made it difficult for Roman commanders to predict their location and movements, preventing the kind of coordinated response that might crush the rebellion. Moving through agricultural areas also provided opportunities for resupply and resource gathering that would be impossible in other environments. Spartacus's approach to supply and logistics revealed sophisticated understanding of what armies need to function effectively. Food, weapons, medical supplies, clothing, shelter, and transportation all required constant attention and planning. The rebel army lived off the land when possible, but they also organized systematic collection of resources from Roman estates and supply convoys. This combination of foraging and raiding provided the material foundation for continued operations. The recruitment strategy employed during this period showed remarkable political intelligence. Rather than simply accepting anyone who wanted to join, Spartacus and his lieutenants evaluated potential recruits for their skills, motivation, and reliability. They sought fighters who could contribute to military effectiveness while avoiding individuals who might create internal problems or security risks. This selective approach helped maintain unit cohesion while managing the rapid growth of their forces. The geographic knowledge displayed during the rebellion's expansion phase suggests either remarkable intelligence gathering or extensive prior familiarity with southern Italian terrain. Spartacus led his followers through routes that maximized their advantages while minimizing Roman opportunities for ambush or encirclement. This intimate understanding of local geography, including roads, rivers, mountain passes, and defensible positions, proved crucial for the rebellion's early success. The Roman Senate took notice. More troops were dispatched. Battles followed. Some were small and chaotic. Others were larger, as the rebels faced trained Roman commanders. The escalation from local militia to senatorial intervention marked a crucial turning point in the rebellion's development. What had begun as a regional law enforcement problem was now recognized as a serious military threat requiring professional Roman response. This acknowledgement represented both vindication for Spartacus's strategic vision and the beginning of a far more dangerous phase of the conflict. The deployment of regular Roman legions changed the entire character of the war. These were professional soldiers with years of training and combat experience, equipped with standardized weapons and armor, organized according to tested tactical doctrines, and commanded by officers who understood both strategy and logistics. Unlike the militia forces defeated earlier, these troops represented the military machine that had conquered most of the known world. The battles that followed varied enormously in scale, duration, and outcome. Some were brief skirmishes when advanced scouts encountered each other unexpectedly, resulting in casualties but little strategic significance. Others were major engagements involving thousands of combatants, with outcomes that affected the overall course of the war. The rebels won some of these encounters through superior tactics or favorable terrain, while losing others to Roman military superiority. The smaller battles often favored Spartacus's forces, who possessed advantages in mobility, local knowledge, and individual combat skills. Gladiators trained for single combat excelled in the confused melee fighting that characterized many of these engagements. Their superior physical conditioning and weapon skills gave them edges in personal combat that could prove decisive when numbers were relatively equal. Larger battles tended to favor Roman forces, whose training emphasized unit cohesion and coordinated tactics designed for major engagements. Roman legions fought as integrated units, with each soldier understanding his role in larger tactical schemes. Their engineering capabilities allowed them to construct fortifications and siege equipment that could neutralize many of the rebels' advantages. The Roman commanders sent against Spartacus represented varying levels of competence and experience. Some were political appointees, more concerned with personal advancement than military effectiveness. Others were seasoned veterans who understood both the challenges and opportunities presented by this unusual war. The quality of Roman leadership in specific battles often determined outcomes as much as the relative strengths of the opposing forces. Despite limited resources and inconsistent discipline among his followers, Spartacus won several engagements. His army grew to as many as 70,000 men, perhaps more. Their presence became a constant anxiety for Roman citizens living nearby. Fields were abandoned, villages emptied, panic spread. The military successes achieved by Spartacus, despite his disadvantages, testified to both his strategic genius and the motivation of his followers. Roman historians, writing after the rebellion's defeat, often attributed rebel victories to luck or Roman mistakes, rather than acknowledging the tactical skill and fierce determination that made such successes possible. Modern analysis suggests that Spartacus possessed genuine military talent that might have achieved great things under different circumstances. The resource limitations faced by the rebel army were constant and severe. Unlike Roman legions, which relied on established supply lines and logistical systems, Spartacus's forces lived primarily off what they could capture or commandeer from the countryside. This meant that strategic decisions were often driven by immediate supply needs rather than optimal military considerations. The discipline problems within the rebel ranks reflected the diverse backgrounds and motivations of the fighters. Professional gladiators understood military organization and accepted the necessity of following orders, but agricultural slaves and other recruits often lacked this training and experience. Some joined the rebellion seeking freedom, others wanted revenge against their former masters, and still others simply saw opportunities for pillage and personal advancement. Managing an army of 70,000 men presented logistical challenges that would have tested experienced Roman commanders with full governmental support. Spartacus had to coordinate movements, manage supplies, maintain communications, treat wounded, and make strategic decisions while constantly moving to avoid Roman encirclement. The fact that he succeeded in keeping such a force together and effective for over 2 years represents an extraordinary achievement. The psychological impact of the rebellion on Roman civilian populations cannot be overstated. For centuries, Roman citizens had lived secure in the knowledge that their military dominated all potential enemies and that their social system provided internal stability. The success of escaped slaves in defeating Roman legions shattered these assumptions, creating fears that went far beyond immediate physical threats. Agricultural production in affected areas collapsed as slaves fled to join the rebellion, and free farmers abandoned their fields rather than risk capture or death. Trade routes became dangerous, disrupting commerce throughout southern Italy. Urban populations lived in constant fear that the rebel army might attack their cities, leading to panic buying, hoarding, and general economic disruption. The psychological warfare conducted by both sides added another dimension to the conflict. Spartacus used Roman fears effectively, sometimes allowing exaggerated rumors about his army's size and intentions to spread unchecked. Romans responded with brutal reprisals against slave populations suspected of supporting the rebellion, creating cycles of violence that pushed more people toward active resistance. Spartacus attempted to lead his forces north, aiming to escape over the Alps and out of Italy. Freedom seemed within reach. But for reasons historians still debate, the rebel army eventually turned back south. Some believe Spartacus wanted to continue raiding and looting. Others think divisions among his followers prevented a unified escape. The decision to march north toward the Alps represented perhaps the most controversial strategic choice of the entire rebellion. From a purely military perspective, it offered the best chance for long-term survival and success. Once beyond Roman territory, the rebel army could either disperse to their various homelands or establish themselves as an independent force in territories not yet under Roman control. The Alpine route had been used successfully by other military forces, most famously by Hannibal during the Second Punic War. While challenging, the mountain passes were navigable by determined forces willing to accept significant casualties and hardships. Celtic tribes in Gaul might have provided allies, or at least neutral territory, where former slaves could establish new lives beyond Roman reach. The apparent proximity of freedom made the subsequent decision to turn south all the more tragic and puzzling. Historical sources provide conflicting explanations for this crucial turning point, reflecting both the limited information available to ancient historians and the complex internal dynamics of the rebel army that outsiders could never fully understand. One explanation suggests that Spartacus himself wanted to escape, but was overruled by followers who preferred continued warfare in Italy. Many rebels had suffered greatly under Roman rule and desired revenge more than freedom. The opportunity to continue inflicting damage on Roman interests, capturing wealth, and settling scores with former oppressors may have seemed more attractive than the uncertain prospects of life beyond the Alps. Internal divisions within the rebel leadership may have made unified decision-making impossible. Spartacus shared command with other gladiator leaders, including Crixus and Enemos, who may have had different strategic visions and personal objectives. Consensus among such strong-willed individuals would have been difficult to achieve, particularly when the decision involved abandoning Italy and the sources of wealth and revenge that motivated many followers. The logistical challenges of an Alpine crossing with 70,000 people may have seemed insurmountable. Unlike Hannibal's professional army, Spartacus's forces included women, children, elderly individuals, and wounded fighters who would struggle with mountain conditions. The supplies needed for such a journey, including food, clothing, and equipment suitable for alpine weather, may have been impossible to accumulate while maintaining the mobility necessary to avoid Roman pursuit. Political considerations may have also influenced the decision. Spartacus and his advisors may have believed that continued success in Italy would inspire similar rebellions throughout the Roman world, creating a general uprising that could overthrow the entire system of slavery. From this perspective, abandoning Italy just as momentum was building could have seemed like a betrayal of enslaved people everywhere who looked to the rebellion for inspiration and hope. The psychological factors affecting this decision should not be underestimated. For many rebels, Italy had become their home despite the circumstances that brought them there. Years or decades of life in Roman territory had created emotional attachments to specific places and people that made abandonment painful. The familiar landscapes of southern Italy, however associated with suffering, might have seemed preferable to the unknown territories beyond the Alps. The Senate, growing more alarmed, gave command to Marcus Licinius Crassus. A wealthy and ambitious man, Crassus brought discipline and ruthlessness to the campaign. He imposed strict punishments on his own troops, reviving ancient forms of military discipline like decimation, where every 10th soldier in a failing unit was executed as punishment for cowardice. The appointment of Crassus marked a fundamental shift in Roman approach to the rebellion. Previous commanders had been chosen based on availability or political considerations, often lacking the resources or authority necessary for decisive action. Crassus possessed both enormous personal wealth and the ruthless determination needed to crush the rebellion regardless of cost. Marcus Licinius Crassus was one of the richest men in Roman history, having accumulated vast fortunes through real estate speculation, slave trading, and financial manipulation. His wealth gave him advantages that previous commanders lacked: the ability to equip and supply large armies from his personal resources, the political influence to secure necessary support from the Senate, and the financial incentive to achieve victory quickly and decisively. The revival of decimation demonstrated both Crassus's understanding of Roman military psychology and his willingness to use extreme measures to achieve his objectives. This ancient punishment had fallen into disuse because of its severity, but Crassus recognized that defeating Spartacus would require troops willing to fight with desperate courage against equally desperate enemies. Fear of decimation motivated Roman soldiers to fight harder against the rebels than against foreign enemies. The psychological impact of decimation extended beyond the immediate units subjected to it. News of such harsh discipline spread throughout the Roman army, creating an atmosphere where soldiers feared their own commanders almost as much as enemy weapons. This terror-based motivation proved effective in battles against opponents who could not offer rewards comparable to the punishments threatened by Roman military law. Crassus's approach to the campaign combined traditional Roman military excellence with innovations designed specifically for this unusual war. He understood that defeating Spartacus required not just winning battles, but destroying the rebel army's ability to recruit, resupply, and maintain morale. This comprehensive strategy targeted the rebellion's foundations rather than just its military manifestations. The resources committed to the campaign under Crassus's command dwarfed previous Roman efforts. 8 legions, approximately 40,000 professional soldiers, supported by auxiliary units, cavalry, engineers, and specialist troops, represented the largest force ever assembled to suppress a slave rebellion. This massive military commitment demonstrated both the seriousness of the threat and Rome's determination to end it permanently. The final confrontations were brutal. The Roman forces surrounded Spartacus and his army, building fortifications to trap them. The rebels attempted one last desperate breakout. The siege tactics employed by Crassus revealed both strategic brilliance and ruthless practicality. Rather than pursuing the rebel army across the countryside, he chose to force a decisive confrontation by eliminating their mobility and supply options. The construction of siege works across the southern tip of Italy created a trap from which escape would be nearly impossible. The fortifications built by Roman engineers represented a masterpiece of military construction. Walls, ditches, stakes, and other obstacles stretched for miles across the narrowest part of the Italian peninsula, creating a barrier that channeled rebel movements into predetermined areas where Roman forces could achieve maximum advantage. The scale of these works rivaled the siege lines built around major cities during foreign wars. The psychological impact of encirclement cannot be understated. Spartacus and his followers found themselves trapped in increasingly confined territory, with supplies running low and escape routes systematically eliminated. The knowledge that capture meant certain death motivated desperate resistance, but it also created internal pressures that threatened to tear the rebel army apart from within. The rebel attempts to break through Roman lines demonstrated both tactical intelligence and heroic determination. Spartacus organized coordinated assaults designed to punch through the weakest points in Roman fortifications, concentrating his best fighters against specific objectives while creating diversions elsewhere. These attacks came close to succeeding on several occasions, with rebel forces briefly penetrating Roman positions before being driven back by reinforcements. The desperation of these final battles transformed ordinary men and women into legendary fighters. Knowing that surrender meant crucifixion, the rebels fought with a ferocity that impressed even their Roman enemies. Former household slaves wielded weapons with deadly skill. Agricultural workers charged Roman lines with the fury of professional soldiers. And gladiators performed acts of individual heroism that would have earned thunderous applause in any arena. But courage alone could not overcome the systematic advantages that Crassus had assembled against them. Roman engineering had created killing fields where rebel attacks could be channeled and destroyed. Professional legions, disciplined by fear of decimation and motivated by promises of reward, maintained their formations and tactical coherence even under desperate assault. The siege works held, the trap remained closed, and the rebel army found itself ground down by attrition and exhaustion. The final battle came in 71 BCE, somewhere in the mountains of southern Italy. The exact location remains disputed by historians, but the outcome was never in doubt once Crassus had achieved his strategic encirclement. Spartacus himself died fighting, sword in hand, surrounded by the bodies of his closest companions. His body was never found among the thousands of corpses that littered the battlefield, leading to legends that he had somehow escaped to fight another day. The aftermath of the rebellion was as brutal as the conflict itself. Crassus ordered the crucifixion of 6,000 captured rebels along the Appian Way, the main road between Rome and Capua. Their bodies hung from crosses for miles, a testament to Roman vengeance and a warning to any who might consider similar resistance. The sight of these crucifixions haunted travelers for months, the decomposing corpses serving as a grim reminder of what happened to those who challenged Roman authority. The survivors of the rebellion faced various fates. Some were sold back into slavery, their previous rebellion making them valuable as examples of what happened to those who resisted. Others were sent to the mines, where life expectancy was measured in months rather than years. A few, perhaps those who had shown particular skill or courage, were forced back into gladiatorial schools to provide entertainment for the very system they had tried to destroy. The psychological impact of Spartacus's defeat extended far beyond the immediate participants. Slave populations throughout the Roman world received the message that resistance was futile, that Roman power was ultimately irresistible, regardless of the courage or determination of those who opposed it. The rebellion's failure reinforced the social structures that made such uprisings seem impossible, creating a psychological barrier that would persist for generations. Yet the rebellion's legacy could not be entirely suppressed. The fact that escaped slaves had defeated Roman legions, held territory for over 2 years, and required Rome's full attention to defeat, became part of the historical record that no amount of propaganda could erase. Future generations would remember that resistance was possible, that the system was not as invincible as it pretended to be. For Rome itself, the Spartacus rebellion marked a turning point in the Republic's internal development. The crisis had revealed weaknesses in the system that ambitious politicians like Crassus could exploit for personal advantage. The vast resources required to suppress the rebellion, combined with the wealth and glory gained from its defeat, helped propel Crassus toward the first triumvirate with Pompey and Julius Caesar. The rebellion also exposed the fundamental contradictions of a society built on slave labor, while celebrating military virtue and personal courage. Roman audiences who cheered gladiatorial combat in the arena were forced to confront the reality that these same fighters, given the opportunity, would turn their skills against their captors. The entertainment value of gladiatorial games was forever tainted by the knowledge of what such men might accomplish if they chose rebellion over submission. Modern historians continue to debate the significance of Spartacus's rebellion within the broader context of Roman history. Some view it as a unique event driven by exceptional circumstances and leadership, while others see it as symptomatic of deeper problems within Roman society that would eventually contribute to the Republic's collapse. The rebellion's impact on the development of Roman military tactics, political institutions, and social structures can be traced through subsequent centuries. The story of Spartacus has transcended its historical origins to become a symbol of resistance against oppression throughout human history. From the American Civil War to modern civil rights movements, his example has inspired those who fight against seemingly impossible odds for the fundamental right to determine their own destiny. The gladiator who refused to die for Rome, entertainment became an eternal reminder that the human spirit cannot be permanently enslaved. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Spartacus's story is not its tragic conclusion, but the fact that it happened at all. In a world where slavery was accepted as natural and inevitable, where the idea of successful slave rebellion seemed impossible, a Thracian gladiator and his followers created something unprecedented. They transformed themselves from entertainment commodities into an army that challenged the greatest military power of the ancient world. Their ultimate defeat was perhaps inevitable, given the vast resources and systematic advantages that Rome could bring to bear against them. But their refusal to accept their fate, their willingness to risk everything for the chance at freedom, and their temporary success in creating an alternative to the world that enslaved them, created a legacy that outlasted the Roman Empire itself. The dust has long since settled on the battlefields where Spartacus fought and died. The crosses along the Appian Way have crumbled, their grim warnings forgotten by time. But the story endures, a testament to the power of human courage in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, and a reminder that the desire for freedom can never be completely extinguished, no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against it. In the quiet moments between the clash of swords and the roar of crowds, in the space between submission and rebellion, Spartacus found something that his captors could never take away, a knowledge that he had chosen his own fate, fought for his own cause, and died as a free man rather than lived as a slave. That choice, and the courage it required, remains as relevant today as it was in the dust and heat of ancient Italy, where a gladiator's rebellion briefly lit a flame that still burns in the human imagination. Within a generation of Spartacus's defeat, Roman engineers would create the most sophisticated arena the world had ever seen. The Colosseum, rising from the heart of Rome like a monument to organized violence, would represent the culmination of everything Romans had learned about staging death as entertainment. But the true genius of this massive structure lay not in what spectators could see, but in what remained hidden beneath their feet. Let your breathing settle again as we leave the dusty battlefields and step quietly into the heart of ancient Rome. The noise of the streets grows distant. The clatter of carts, the voices of merchants, the laughter of children, all fade away as we approach one of the most iconic structures in Roman history, the Colosseum. Imagine standing before it, the sun casting long shadows across the worn stone, the outer walls rising high above you, weathered but still standing proud after centuries. In its prime, the Colosseum was a place of noise and excitement. Tens of thousands of spectators gathered here for entertainment, for distractions, for glimpses of triumph and defeat. But tonight, we are not here to sit in the stands. We are going beneath the marble seats, beneath the sandy arena floor, into the hidden tunnels and chambers few ever saw. The Romans called this underground area the hypogeum, a network of corridors, cages, storage rooms, and trapdoors. It stretched beneath the arena like the roots of a great tree, quiet, dark, and alive with restless movement. Close your eyes and imagine the air down here, cool and slightly damp, thick with the scent of earth and old stone. The faint metallic tang of iron tools and chains lingers in the stillness. Flickering torchlight casts soft, uneven shadows across the walls. The entrance to this underworld was carefully guarded. Narrow stone steps led downward from several points around the arena's perimeter. Each descent was steep and worn smooth by countless footsteps. The walls pressed close on either side, carved from the living rock and reinforced with carefully fitted stones. Water seeped through the joints in places, creating dark stains that mapped the passage of centuries. Here, dozens of workers moved with practiced efficiency. Animal handlers, stagehands, and laborers went about their tasks with calm focus. Every performance above required careful timing and coordination below. These men knew their roles intimately. They had rehearsed each movement, each signal, each precisely timed action that would bring death or glory to the arena floor above. The workers were mostly slaves, captured in distant campaigns or born into servitude. Some were freedmen who had earned their release, but remained bound to the Colosseum by contracts and necessity. A few were citizens of modest means who found steady work in the endless machinery of entertainment. They wore simple tunics, often stained with sweat and dirt. Their hands were calloused from rope work, and their backs bent from lifting heavy loads. Among them moved the beastmasters, men whose expertise with wild animals commanded both respect and fear. They carried long poles tipped with iron points, tools for guiding reluctant lions or prodding stubborn bears toward their assigned platforms. These handlers had learned to read the mood of each creature, to sense when a leopard was merely restless, or when it had reached a dangerous edge of panic. Large wooden elevators, operated by human muscle, rose and fell with slow creaks and groans. Teams of men pulled on ropes and turned capstans to lift heavy platforms. The mechanism was deceptively simple, but required perfect coordination. 8 men might work a single elevator, their movements synchronized by called commands and practiced rhythm. The platforms themselves were works of engineering art, designed to bear enormous weights while fitting precisely through openings in the arena floor above. At any moment, a trapdoor in the arena floor might swing open, releasing a wild animal or armed fighter directly into the spotlight. The timing had to be exact. Too early, and the dramatic effect was lost. Too late, and the flow of the spectacle was broken. The workers below listened constantly to the sounds from above, reading the crowd's mood through their cheers and gasps, timing each revelation to maximize its impact. The elevator systems were marvels of mechanical ingenuity. Counterweights helped balance the loads, making it possible for human strength alone to lift platforms bearing several tons. Pulleys redirected the force, allowing teams of workers to operate from positions of safety while their cargo rose into potential chaos above. The wooden gears, carved and fitted by master craftsmen, turned with surprising smoothness despite their crude appearance. Some elevators were designed for speed, shooting their cargo upward in seconds to create the illusion of supernatural appearance. Others rose slowly, building tension as curious heads emerged gradually from the arena floor. The most sophisticated could be operated in reverse, allowing for the dramatic disappearance of performers or the quick removal of bodies and debris. Cages lined the tunnels. Lions, Leopards, bears, and even elephants waited in the gloom. Their restless pacing echoed softly through the chambers. Some animals were captured in distant lands and brought to Rome after long, difficult journeys. They arrived frightened and hungry, their senses overwhelmed by new sounds and smells. The animal quarters were a study in controlled chaos. Each species required different handling, different feeding schedules, different precautions. The great cats paced endlessly in their iron-barred enclosures, their golden eyes reflecting the torchlight. Bears sat in sullen resignation, occasionally rising to test the strength of their restraints with casual swipes of massive paws. Elephants, the most challenging to transport and maintain, were kept in specially constructed chambers with reinforced walls and doors, operated by complex lever systems. The smell in the animal areas was overwhelming. Despite constant cleaning by teams of slaves, the odors of waste, fear, and wild flesh permeated everything. Straw was changed daily. Waste was removed by the cartload, and the stone floors were scrubbed with vinegar and water. Still, the scent clung to clothes and skin, marking anyone who worked in these depths with an unmistakable signature. Feeding the beasts was a constant challenge. Fresh meat arrived daily from the city's markets and slaughterhouses. Some animals required live prey to maintain their hunting instincts for the arena. Goats, rabbits, and other smaller creatures were kept in separate areas, their terrified bleating adding another layer to the underground symphony of sounds. The handlers developed individual relationships with their charges. They learned which lions were more aggressive, which bears were likely to refuse food when stressed, which leopards might be coaxed to perform simple behaviors that would enhance their arena appearances. Some of the more experienced animal keepers could calm a nervous elephant with gentle words and patient gestures, skills that often meant the difference between a successful show and a dangerous disaster. In one corner, prisoners waited their turn, men condemned to face beasts or other fighters. Some sat in quiet resignation. Others whispered prayers, their voices barely rising above the creaking of wood and the shuffle of sand overhead. These condemned men came from many backgrounds. Some were criminals guilty of serious offenses against Roman law. Others were prisoners of war, captured soldiers from distant campaigns who had been sentenced to die for the entertainment of Roman citizens. A few were Christians or members of other religious groups whose beliefs were considered threats to Roman order. Their holding areas were Spartan and grim. Stone benches lined the walls. Iron shackles, worn smooth by countless previous occupants, were bolted to the floor and walls. Small oil lamps provided minimal light, creating pools of yellow illumination that barely pushed back the surrounding darkness. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, fear, and despair. Some prisoners spent days or even weeks in these chambers, waiting for their assigned performance date. They were fed simple rations of bread, thin gruel, and watered wine. Medical attention was provided only to ensure they would be healthy enough to put on a good show when their time came. Guards checked on them regularly, more to prevent suicide than to provide comfort. The psychological torment was often worse than the physical conditions. The condemned could hear everything happening above. The roar of crowds, the clash of weapons, the screams of previous performers. They knew exactly what awaited them, and the knowledge gnawed at their minds during the long hours of waiting. Yet not all prisoners were destined for certain death. Some were trained fighters, gladiators, who had been captured or purchased rather than trained from youth in the gladiatorial schools. These men maintained their weapons and armor in the underground chambers, preparing for contests where skill and luck might yet preserve their lives. They practiced sword forms in the narrow corridors, their movements constrained, but their determination undiminished. The workers below did not control the fate of these men or animals. Their job was simply to ensure that each appearance in the arena happened on time and without delay, to make the spectacle seem effortless. This illusion of effortlessness required enormous coordination. Signal systems had been developed using torches, flags, and shouted commands to communicate across the maze of tunnels. A single mistake in timing could ruin an elaborate performance or, worse, endanger the lives of the workers themselves. The engineering of the hypogeum was impressive. There were over 30 elevators and dozens of hidden entrances. Some platforms were designed to lift multiple animals at once. Others carried props or scenery for elaborate recreations of famous battles. In some shows, entire sections of the arena floor were flooded to create miniature naval battles. The flooding system was perhaps the most ambitious feature of the entire complex. A network of channels and gates could redirect water from nearby aqueducts to fill the arena to a depth of several feet. The waterproofing required to prevent leakage into the tunnels below was a masterpiece of Roman engineering. Special chambers were sealed with lead and concrete, creating watertight compartments that could remain dry even when the arena above had been transformed into a temporary lake. Naval battles, called naumachia, required their own specialized equipment. Model ships, built to scale but functional enough to carry armed fighters, were stored in dedicated chambers and assembled on special platforms that could be quickly transported to the flooded arena. The logistics of these spectacles were staggering. Hundreds of performers, dozens of ships, and thousands of gallons of water had to be coordinated perfectly to create the illusion of epic sea battles in the heart of landlocked Rome. Other mechanical devices served different purposes. Hidden springs and pivots allowed sections of the arena floor to tilt suddenly, creating hills and valleys in the landscape of combat. Concealed pits could open without warning, swallowing unwary fighters or revealing new obstacles and challenges. Some platforms were designed to rotate, disorienting combatants or presenting different scenes to different sections of the audience. The prop storage areas were vast and meticulously organized. Artificial trees and rocks created forest settings for hunts. Painted backdrops suggested distant cities or mythical landscapes. Weapons racks held thousands of swords, spears, shields, and exotic arms from across the empire. Costumes hung on wooden frames, ready to transform ordinary men into gods, heroes, or monsters at a moment's notice. The noises below were constant. The grinding of wooden gears, the slap of sandals on stone, the low rumble of animals reacting to distant sounds. Above, the crowd roared with excitement, unaware of the carefully rehearsed chaos unfolding beneath their feet. The acoustic environment of the hypogeum was unique and unsettling. Sound traveled strangely through the stone corridors, echoing and distorting until familiar voices became unrecognizable. The workers developed their own methods of communication, using hand signals and coded whistles that could be understood even over the mechanical noise of the elevators and the animal sounds that never ceased. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling in many areas, creating a steady percussion that became the heartbeat of the underground world. The drops fell into carefully placed containers, their rhythm marking time for the workers who spent their entire shifts in this sunless realm. Ventilation was a constant concern. The Romans had engineered a system of shafts and channels that brought fresh air into the tunnels while carrying away the worst of the accumulated odors. Even so, the air remained thick and oppressive, heavy with moisture and the breath of too many living creatures crowded into too small a space. The temperature below ground remained relatively constant, regardless of the season above. In winter, the tunnels felt warm compared to the Roman streets. In summer, they provided cool refuge from the blazing heat that baked the arena floor. Workers appreciated this climate control, though they paid for it with the absence of natural light and the constant dampness that seemed to seep into their bones. For those who worked in the hypogeum, there was little glory. Their faces were unknown to the spectators, their labor invisible. But without them, the grand displays above would grind to a halt. The social hierarchy below ground mirrored that of Roman society, but with its own unique characteristics. Skilled animal handlers commanded respect and better treatment than common laborers. Experienced elevator operators were valued for their precision and reliability. Even among the slaves, those with specialized knowledge held positions of relative authority. Some workers had been born into this underground world, sons following fathers into the same dangerous and demanding profession. They knew every tunnel and passage, every mechanical system and emergency procedure. Their expertise was irreplaceable, and they were treated accordingly, with better food, sleeping quarters, and occasional privileges that made their servitude more bearable. The work shifts were long and demanding. Men began before dawn and continued well into the evening, matching the schedule of the arena performances above. During major festivals or special events, they might work for days with only brief periods of rest. The physical demands were enormous, but so were the psychological pressures of ensuring that every performance proceeded without fatal errors. Sometimes mistakes happened. A trapdoor failed to open. An elevator jammed mid-lift. An animal broke loose before reaching the arena floor. When that happened, fear spread quickly through the tunnels. Yet repairs were made swiftly. The show above could not wait. Emergency procedures had been developed through bitter experience. When an elevator mechanism failed, backup teams rushed to provide manual power. When animals escaped their containment, trained hunters with nets and spears moved quickly to recapture or kill them before they could threaten the workers. When structural elements broke, engineers and craftsmen appeared with tools and materials to make immediate repairs. The consequences of failure were severe. A missed cue might result in public embarrassment and financial loss for the show's sponsors. A mechanical breakdown could endanger performers and spectators alike. An escaped animal posed a threat not only to the underground workers, but potentially to the thousands of people seated above. The pressure to maintain perfect performance was constant and unforgiving. Some failures became legends, whispered stories passed down among the workers. There was the tale of a lion that broke free from its cage and spent hours roaming the tunnels before being cornered and killed. Another story told of an elevator that dropped its platform at the worst possible moment, crushing two workers and ruining an expensive spectacle. These cautionary tales served to remind everyone of the stakes involved in their daily labor. Yet for all the dangers and difficulties, many workers took pride in their craft. They were part of something magnificent, contributors to spectacles that amazed and delighted people throughout the empire. They possessed skills that few others could master, knowledge that made them valuable despite their low social status. Over time, these tunnels witnessed thousands of lives passing through. Gladiators preparing for their final moments. Prisoners walking slowly toward the light above. Animals driven upward to perform or perish. The human stories that unfolded in these depths were countless and varied. Veterans of many contests might spend their final hours giving advice to younger fighters, sharing hard-won knowledge about reading opponents and surviving in the arena. Some prisoners found unexpected friendships in their last days, bonds forged in the face of shared mortality. Religious practices flourished in secret corners of the tunnels. Christians gathered to pray and share communion with bread saved from their meager rations. Followers of Mithras carved small shrines in hidden alcoves. Soldiers from distant provinces made offerings to their homeland gods, seeking protection or at least courage for what was to come. Letters were sometimes written by those who could manage the skill, messages to family members or loved ones who might never know what had become of their writers. These communications were smuggled out by sympathetic workers or guards, though more often they were simply hidden in cracks in the stone walls, testimonies to lives that would soon be forgotten. The children of workers sometimes played in the safer areas of the tunnels, their laughter a strange contrast to the grim purpose of their surroundings. They grew up understanding death and violence as normal parts of life, yet they still found ways to be children, creating games from scraps of wood and stone, telling stories that transformed the dark corridors into magical kingdoms. The Colosseum itself stood as both a marvel of engineering and a symbol of Rome's appetite for spectacle. The hypogeum, hidden from view, remained the silent stage where it all began. The contrast between the visible grandeur above and the hidden functionality below captured something essential about Roman civilization itself. The empire's public face was magnificent, confident, and overwhelming in its display of power and wealth. Beneath that surface lay the machinery of control, the careful systems of labor and organization that made such displays possible. The hypogeum represented Roman engineering at its most practical and effective. Every feature had been designed with specific purposes in mind. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was merely decorative. The beauty of the system lay in its efficiency, its ability to create seemingly magical effects through the application of mechanical principles and human coordination. Foreign visitors who learned about the tunnels were often amazed by their sophistication. Rome's ability to create such complex hidden systems spoke to the empire's technological advancement and organizational skills. Word of the Colosseum's mechanical marvels spread throughout the known world, enhancing Rome's reputation for both entertainment and engineering excellence. The hypogeum also served as a model for similar construction in other Roman cities. Amphitheaters throughout the empire incorporated variations of the elevator and trapdoor systems pioneered in Rome. Techniques developed in these tunnels influenced construction and engineering projects far removed from the entertainment industry. Today, visitors walking the ruins can glimpse parts of these tunnels. Some sections have been excavated and restored. Standing there, one can almost hear the echoes of the past, the distant clank of chains, the faint shout of a worker calling for more hands on a rope, the muffled roar of a waiting lion. Modern archaeology has revealed much about how the hypogeum functioned, but questions remain. The exact mechanisms of some devices have been lost to time. The complete layout of the tunnel system is still being mapped. New discoveries continue to shed light on the daily operations of this underground world. Conservation efforts face significant challenges. The same water that once flooded the arena for naval battles now threatens the structural integrity of the tunnels. Modern Rome's urban infrastructure creates vibrations and environmental changes that accelerate the decay of ancient stone and mortar. Careful preservation work continues, balancing public access with the need to protect these irreplaceable remains. The ethical questions raised by the hypogeum's original purpose continue to challenge modern visitors. The engineering achievement cannot be separated from the human cost of the entertainment it enabled. The tunnels represent both human ingenuity and human cruelty, technical brilliance, and moral blindness. Educational programs now help visitors understand the complete context of the Colosseum, including the hidden world beneath. The stories of workers, prisoners, and animals are told alongside the tales of famous gladiators and emperors. The hypogeum has become a symbol not just of Roman engineering, but of the complex moral legacy of ancient civilizations. As you rest here now, safe and still, let your mind picture those dark, narrow passageways, cool stone beneath your feet, the scent of damp earth, and the steady, determined rhythm of unseen labor. The workers who toiled in these depths were largely anonymous, their names unrecorded in the histories that celebrated emperors and gladiators. Yet their contributions were essential to one of Rome's most enduring symbols. They represent the countless unnamed individuals whose labor built and maintained the empire, whose skills and sacrifices made possible the grandeur that still amazes us today. In the deepest sections of the hypogeum, where few modern visitors ever venture, the darkness remains almost complete. Here, in spaces that have been sealed for centuries, the past feels most present. Scratches on the walls might be the marks of ancient tools or the desperate clawing of trapped animals. Stains on the stone could be rust from iron fittings or something more ominous. The silence in these depths is profound, broken only by the occasional drop of water or the whisper of air moving through forgotten passages. Yet those who work in the tunnels today, archaeologists and conservators, sometimes report an almost tangible sense of presence, as if the intense emotions and experiences that once filled these spaces have left some permanent impression on the stones themselves. Soon, we'll leave these shadows behind. Let's now step upward and outward, following the same paths that once carried gladiators toward their moment of truth. We'll climb the worn stone steps that lead from the underground world to the arena floor, where sand soaked up blood and sweat under the blazing Roman sun. From there, we'll rise higher still, past the marble seats where citizens cheered and senators lounged, beyond the awnings that provided shade for the privileged few. Our journey will take us into the bright courtyards, lavish gardens, and marble columns of Rome's elite. But we won't simply observe their wealth and power from a distance. Instead, we'll walk beside a Roman senator through a single day of his life, experiencing the weight of decision and responsibility that shaped an empire. We'll see how the same civilization that built the killing machine beneath our feet also created systems of law, governance, and culture that influence our world even today. The medical facilities in the Hypogeum were crude but necessary. A small chamber near the gladiator preparation areas served as an infirmary where basic wounds could be treated. The medicus, usually a Greek slave with some knowledge of anatomy, worked by lamplight with instruments that were cleaned in vinegar between patients. Broken bones were set with wooden splints. Deep cuts were sewn with thread made from animal sinew. Burns from torches or hot metal, treated with honey and oils. The medical supplies were stored in clay jars and wooden boxes sealed with wax. Poppy extract provided pain relief for the most serious injuries. Willow bark tea reduced fever and inflammation. Various herbs were mixed into poultices for wounds that showed signs of infection. The smell of these medicines added another layer to the complex odor profile of the underground spaces. Most medical attention was focused on keeping performers alive and functional until their scheduled appearances. A gladiator with a minor injury might be given just enough treatment to ensure he could still fight. A prisoner who fell ill might be left to recover on his own unless his condition threatened to spread to others. The calculating nature of this medical care reflected the economic reality of the arena, where human lives were valued primarily for their entertainment potential. The Hypogeum also contained workshops where specialized equipment was manufactured and repaired. Blacksmiths worked at small forges, hammering out replacement parts for the mechanical systems. The ring of metal on metal echoed through the tunnels as they shaped new gears, hinges, and fittings. Sparks flew in the darkness, brief stars that illuminated sweating faces and soot-stained hands. Carpenters maintained the wooden components of elevators and platforms. They replaced worn planks, reinforced joints that had been stressed by heavy loads, and crafted new trapdoor mechanisms when the old ones finally gave way. The smell of fresh wood shavings and carpenter's glue mixed with the earthier odors of the animal quarters. Rope makers twisted new lines from hemp and other fibers. The quality of these ropes was literally a matter of life and death. A frayed line could snap under load, sending a platform crashing down with potentially fatal results. The rope makers tested their products rigorously, subjecting sample lengths to stress tests that exceeded the normal operating loads. Leather workers crafted and repaired the harnesses and restraints used to control animals and prisoners. They worked with thick hides that had been specially treated to resist the claws and teeth of wild beasts. The leather had to be strong enough to hold a panicking lion, yet flexible enough to allow the natural movement that would prevent the animal from injuring itself before its arena appearance. The underground areas included primitive but effective sewage systems. Waste from the animal quarters and human facilities was channeled through stone-lined trenches that carried it away from the working areas. Roman engineering ensured that these waste channels flowed toward the Tiber River, though the journey involved several intermediate collection points where solid waste was removed and disposed of elsewhere. Fresh water was brought into the hypogeum through a network of pipes connected to the city's aqueduct system. Stone basins provided drinking water for workers and animals alike. Larger reservoirs supplied the water needed for cleaning and, when necessary, for the elaborate flooding operations that transformed the arena into a temporary lake. The water distribution system included ingenious mechanisms for controlling flow and pressure. Bronze valves could redirect water to different areas of the tunnels depending on need. Emergency systems could quickly flood certain sections to extinguish fires or wash away dangerous spills. The Romans understood that water was not just essential for life, but also a powerful tool for managing the complex operations of their underground world. Storage areas for costumes and props were vast and meticulously organized. Separate chambers held different categories of equipment. Military gear from various periods and regions of the empire filled one section. Mythological costumes, designed to transform ordinary men into gods and heroes, occupied another. Religious vestments for ceremonies and ritual reenactments were kept in specially protected areas where they would not be damaged by moisture or pests. The costume storage included pieces that had been worn by famous performers. A helmet might have been used by a gladiator who had achieved celebrity status before his death. A theatrical mask could have graced the face of an actor in a particularly memorable mythological presentation. These items were treated with special care, not out of sentiment, but because successful costumes and props were valuable assets that could be reused in future performances. Weapons maintenance was a constant concern. Thousands of swords, spears, shields, and exotic weapons from across the empire required regular attention. Blades were sharpened on whetstones, their edges honed to deadly perfection. Metal surfaces were cleaned and oiled to prevent rust in the humid underground environment. Wooden handles and shields were inspected for cracks that could fail at critical moments. The weapons masters who supervised this work were often former gladiators themselves, men who had survived long enough in the arena to earn their freedom. They understood from personal experience exactly how a weapon should feel in the hand, how it should be balanced, how its weight should be distributed. Their expertise was invaluable in ensuring that the tools of combat met the exacting standards required for public performance. Some weapons were ceremonial rather than practical, designed more for visual impact than actual combat effectiveness. Golden swords that gleamed in the sunlight, but were too soft to maintain a sharp edge. Elaborately decorated shields that looked magnificent, but were too heavy for effective use. These props served their purpose in spectacles that emphasized drama over genuine combat skill. The hypogeum contained sleeping quarters for workers who lived permanently in the underground complex. These spaces were cramped and basic, with straw mattresses laid on stone platforms. Personal possessions were few and carefully guarded. A worker might own a spare tunic, a small knife for eating, perhaps a ceramic cup or bowl. Luxury was measured in simple comforts, like a wooden pillow or a blanket that was not completely threadbare. The social dynamics of these living spaces were complex. Hierarchies based on skill, seniority, and personal relationships determined who slept where and who had access to the limited amenities. Arguments were settled quickly and quietly, as disruption of the work routine was not tolerated. Friendships formed slowly, but could be surprisingly deep, bonds forged in shared hardship and mutual dependence. Some workers had families in the city above. They would climb the steep stone steps at the end of their shifts to spend time with wives and children who lived in the crowded tenements near the Colosseum. These men carried two different worlds in their minds, the darkness and danger below, and the ordinary struggles of Roman urban life above. The training areas within the hypogeum were used for last-minute preparation and practice. Gladiators who had been brought from the training schools would spend time familiarizing themselves with the specific layout and equipment they would encounter in the arena. They practiced their movements in the confined spaces, learning to navigate the obstacles and opportunities that the underground environment presented. Condemned prisoners who showed aptitude for combat might receive rudimentary weapons training in these areas. While they were not expected to survive their encounters, a prisoner who could put up an entertaining fight was more valuable than one who simply cowered in terror. These impromptu lessons were brief and basic, focusing on fundamental stances and simple attack patterns that might prolong the spectacle. The training areas also served as testing grounds for new equipment and techniques. Experimental weapons might be tried out by volunteers or condemned prisoners. New mechanical devices could be tested under conditions that simulated their intended use. The Romans were constantly innovating, seeking ways to make their spectacles more exciting and their operations more efficient. Record-keeping in the Hypogeum was surprisingly detailed. Scribes maintained inventories of animals, weapons, and equipment. They tracked the condition and performance of gladiators and other performers. Schedules were carefully maintained to ensure that the complex choreography of arena events proceeded smoothly. These records were written on wax tablets that could be reused or on papyrus scrolls that were stored in specially prepared chambers. The record keepers also documented unusual events and notable performances. A particularly spectacular fight might be described in detail so that similar scenarios could be recreated in the future. An equipment failure would be analyzed and solutions proposed to prevent recurrence. These administrative functions were essential to the smooth operation of the entertainment complex. Financial records tracked the enormous costs of maintaining the Hypogeum operations. The price of exotic animals, the wages of skilled workers, the cost of materials and supplies, all had to be carefully monitored. Waste and inefficiency were enemies that could make the difference between profit and loss for the entrepreneurs who sponsored major spectacles. Security in the underground areas was layered and comprehensive. Guards at key checkpoints controlled access to different sections of the tunnels. Patrol routes were designed to ensure that no area remained unobserved for long periods. Communication systems allowed guards to summon help quickly when problems arose. The security personnel were usually former soldiers, men who understood discipline and had experience with dangerous situations. They carried weapons and were authorized to use lethal force if necessary to maintain order. Their presence was a constant reminder that the Hypogeum, despite its mechanical marvels and organized efficiency, remained a place where violence was always possible. Some security measures were more subtle. Certain passages could be sealed quickly if a dangerous animal escaped its containment. Emergency exits were strategically placed to allow rapid evacuation of personnel from threatened areas. Warning systems using horns and bells could alert the entire underground complex to various types of emergencies. The relationship between the Hypogeum and the city above was complex and multifaceted. Supplies flowed down through carefully guarded entrances. Waste products were removed and disposed of in designated areas. Bodies of animals and humans who died in the tunnels were taken away for burial or disposal according to established procedures. The economic impact of the Hypogeum extended far beyond the Colosseum itself. Suppliers throughout Rome in the empire provided materials and services needed for its operation. Exotic animal dealers, weapons manufacturers, food suppliers, and countless other businesses depended on the steady demand generated by the arena's appetite for spectacle. The seasonal nature of some spectacles affected the rhythm of life in the Hypogeum. During major festivals, the pace of activity increased dramatically. Workers might labor around the clock to prepare for elaborate multi-day events. The tunnels would be crowded with additional personnel brought in to handle the increased workload. During quieter periods, the Hypogeum took on a different character. Maintenance work could be completed more thoroughly. New equipment could be tested and installed. Workers could catch up on rest and recuperation after the intense demands of major performances. These cycles of activity and relative calm became part of the natural rhythm of underground life. The religious and superstitious practices that flourished in the hypogeum reflected the dangerous and uncertain nature of the work. Shrines to protective deities were hidden in corners and alcoves. Lucky charms and amulets were common among workers who faced daily risks. Rituals for appeasing the spirits of the dead were performed in secret, acknowledging the reality that death was a constant presence in their workplace. Some workers developed elaborate personal rituals designed to ensure their safety and success. A particular sequence of actions before beginning a shift, a specific prayer whispered before operating dangerous equipment, a lucky token carried in a pocket or worn around the neck. These practices provided psychological comfort in an environment where so much was beyond individual control. The contrast could not be more striking. Below, in the hypogeum, men and beasts lived and died in darkness for the entertainment of others. Above, in the palatial homes of the Palatine Hill, other men shaped the destiny of millions with the stroke of a stylus on wax. Both worlds were Ramang, both were real. Both were built on the backs of those who served without choice and dreamed without hope of freedom. As we prepare to leave these tunnels behind, take one last moment to listen. In the silence, you might hear the whisper of ancient voices, the ghost of footsteps on stone, the phantom creak of ropes and pulleys that once lifted death into the light. These sounds are part of Rome's eternal echo, the endless conversation between past and present that continues wherever human ambition builds monuments to power and glory. Now let your thoughts drift upward. Leave behind the cool darkness of the Colosseum's tunnels and step into the light. The air is warmer here, scented with pine, olive oil, and distant traces of garden flowers. The city of Rome stretches in every direction, but here, behind high walls and shaded courtyards, life moves at a slower, more deliberate pace. You are now in the private villa of a Roman senator. The villa stands on one of Rome's 7 hills, built of stone and marble, with carefully arranged columns framing the entrance. It serves as both home and symbol. Power and status are reflected in every detail, from the mosaic floors underfoot to the bronze doors polished until they gleam. The architect who designed this residence understood that every element must speak of authority. Each marble column was selected for its perfect proportions. Each fresco commissioned from the finest artists in the empire. The very placement of the villa, elevated above the common streets, announces the senator's position in society's hierarchy. The grounds themselves tell a story of wealth and cultivation. Terraced gardens cascade down the hillside, filled with imported plants from distant provinces. Roses from Egypt bloom alongside herbs from Gaul. Olive trees, their gnarled trunks speaking of centuries of growth, provide both shade and the precious oil that lights the villa's many lamps. Slaves tend these gardens with devoted care, their movements as choreographed as dancers, ensuring that not a single leaf appears out of place when the senator walks among them. Water features throughout the property demonstrate the senator's access to Rome's greatest engineering marvel. Fountains fed by aqueducts splash softly in hidden corners. A private bath complex rivals those found in the city's public facilities. The sound of flowing water creates a constant, soothing backdrop that masks the noise of the bustling city below. This is intentional. The senator's world must feel removed from the chaos of common life. The morning begins early, but without the urgency felt by soldiers or gladiators. The senator wakes to soft light filtering through silk curtains. These curtains themselves are marvels of luxury, woven from threads that traveled thousands of miles along trade routes the senator's policies helped secure. The bed rests on a platform of polished wood, its mattress stuffed with the finest down and covered in linen so smooth they seem to flow like water beneath his touch. A household slave waits quietly nearby, ready with warm water for washing. This slave, perhaps named Marcus or Gaius, has served the family for years. His presence is so unobtrusive as to be nearly invisible, yet his attention to detail is absolute. The water temperature is perfect. The towels are precisely folded. The morning routine unfolds with the precision of a religious ceremony, each movement practiced and refined through repetition. The senator's bathroom is a marvel of engineering and luxury. Hot water flows through bronze pipes embedded in the walls, keeping the room at a comfortable temperature even in winter. Mirrors of polished bronze reflect the morning light. Oils and perfumes line marble shelves, their containers crafted by master artisans. The floor is heated from below, warming bare feet against the morning chill. As the senator bathes, he can gaze out through high windows at his gardens, already alive with the activity of slaves preparing for the day ahead. The senator's breakfast is light, bread dipped in honey, fresh fruit, perhaps a few olives or cheese. Nothing too heavy. The main meal comes later in the day. Yet even this simple repast reflects privilege. The bread is baked from the finest wheat, ground in the senator's own mills outside the city. The honey comes from hives tended in his country estates. The fruit arrived just hours ago from orchards he owns in the fertile regions south of Rome. The cheese was aged in caves that belonged to his family, their ownership stretching back generations. The dining space where he takes this meal overlooks the villa's central courtyard. From his position at the marble table, he can observe the controlled activity of his household. Slaves move with purpose, carrying out tasks assigned by the steward. The head cook consults with servants about the day's meals. Gardeners tend to potted plants arranged in perfect symmetry. Everything operates according to a system as complex and ordered as the government of Rome itself. After dressing in a carefully arranged toga, the senator moves to the atrium. This toga is not merely clothing, but a statement of citizenship and status. Its wool was woven in workshops owned by his family, then sent to the city's finest tailors for finishing. The purple stripe that adorns its edge signifies his senatorial rank, and the way it drapes speaks to years of practice in wearing it with dignity. His slaves understand the precise method of folding and arranging the garment, and they perform this service with the reverence due to a sacred ritual. The atrium itself is a masterpiece of Roman domestic architecture, a large, open space with a pool of water in the center, designed to catch rain. This impluvium serves both practical and aesthetic purposes, collecting precious rainwater while creating a focal point that draws the eye upward to the opening in the roof above. The walls are decorated with painted frescoes showing scenes from mythology or family history. These are not mere decorations, but carefully chosen narratives that reinforce the senator's connection to Rome's glorious past and divine favor. One fresco depicts the senator's ancestor leading troops in a famous victory. Another shows the family's patron deity bestowing blessings upon their line. Yet another illustrates scenes from Homer's epics, demonstrating the family's cultured appreciation for literature and learning. The colors remain vivid after years of careful maintenance, their blues and reds and golds as bright as the day they were applied. Light flickers from oil lamps still burning from the night before. These lamps, crafted from bronze and decorated with intricate reliefs, burn the finest oil from the senator's own presses. Their light dances across the painted walls, bringing the mythological scenes to life in ways that never fail to impress visitors. The interplay of shadow and illumination has been carefully calculated by the villa's designer to create an atmosphere of mystery and grandeur. Here, clients gather, men of lower status, who depend on the senator for favors, protection, or employment. Each morning, they arrive to offer their greetings, known as the salutatio. This ritual forms the foundation of Roman social order, binding men of different classes together through networks of obligation and patronage. The clients understand their role in this ancient dance. They arrive precisely on time, neither early enough to seem desperate nor late enough to appear disrespectful. Some ask for help with legal matters. A freedman seeks assistance with a property dispute. A young citizen requires representation in court. Others seek financial assistance or introductions to more powerful figures. A merchant hopes for a recommendation to a provincial governor. A veteran requests help securing a pension. Each request is couched in the formal language of respect, acknowledging the senator's superior position while appealing to his sense of duty and honor. The senator listens with practiced patience, offering small nods or quiet promises. His responses are measured and diplomatic, revealing nothing of his private thoughts while maintaining the dignity expected of his station. He has learned to read the true urgency behind each request, to distinguish between genuine need and mere opportunism. Some clients receive immediate attention. Others are told to return another day. A few are quietly dismissed with polite but firm refusals. His steward stands nearby, keeping track of names and requests. This trusted servant, perhaps a freedman who has served the family for decades, maintains detailed records of every interaction. He knows which clients have proven loyal, which have fulfilled their obligations, and which have disappointed the senator in the past. His presence ensures that nothing is forgotten and that all debts, both owed and owing, are properly recorded. The morning's petitioners represent a cross-section of Roman society. Veterans seeking employment, merchants requiring permits, young men of good family hoping for political advancement, artisans seeking commissions. Each has something to offer in exchange for the senator's favor, whether it be votes, services, loyalty, or simply the reflected glory of association with a powerful man. Once the formalities are complete, the senator leaves for the forum. This departure is itself a ritual. His personal slaves gather his writing materials, any documents he might need, and a purse of coins for various expenses. His body slaves ensure his toga is perfectly arranged, his hair properly styled, his hands and face clean of any imperfection. The villa's gates are opened with ceremony, and the senator steps into the wider world of Rome. The journey through the streets is slow. Crowds press close as carts and pedestrians jostle for space. The streets themselves are marvels of engineering, paved with polygonal stones fitted so precisely that they seem to form a single, unbroken surface. Yet they are also chaotic rivers of humanity, carrying the commerce and communication that keep the empire functioning. Merchants call out their goods. Children play near fountains. The senator travels with attendants, his status evident by the number of people trailing behind him. His litter, carried by 8 strong slaves, provides a mobile sanctuary above the street's chaos. From this elevated position, he can observe the city's life while remaining untouched by its disorder. The litter's curtains can be drawn for privacy or opened to allow him to acknowledge the greetings of citizens who recognize him. The slaves who bear him have been trained to move with smooth precision, their steps coordinated to prevent any jarring of their precious cargo. Along the route, the senator encounters the full spectrum of Roman society. Noble matrons in their own litters, traveling to social calls or religious ceremonies. Merchants leading caravans of goods from distant provinces. Slaves carrying messages, hauling supplies, or performing the countless tasks that keep the city functioning. Beggars hoping for coins from passing citizens. Street performers entertaining small crowds. Each scene tells a story of empire, of a world where all roads truly do lead to Rome. The architecture through which he passes speaks of power and permanence. Temples dedicated to the gods who protect Rome and its people. Public buildings where the business of government unfolds. Monuments celebrating military victories in distant lands. Statues of emperors and heroes, their marble faces gazing eternally over the city they helped create. The senator knows that his own legacy may one day be commemorated in stone, his deeds remembered long after his flesh has returned to dust. In the forum, business continues. Discussions of law, politics, and governance fill the air. Fellow senators, magistrates, and orators gather in small groups, voices low but determined. The forum itself is the beating heart of the empire, where representatives from across the known world come to conduct business, settle disputes, and witness the majesty of Roman power. Its marble columns and bronze statues create a setting worthy of the momentous decisions made within its boundaries. The conversations here shape the course of history. A debate about grain supplies from Egypt affects the feeding of Rome's masses. Discussions of military strategy determine the fate of barbarian tribes on distant frontiers. Arguments over legal precedents establish principles that will guide justice for generations. The senator participates in these weighty matters with the gravity they deserve, his voice carrying the authority of his office and the wisdom of his experience. Decisions made here shape the empire. Trade agreements, military campaigns, new laws, all debated in marble halls and sunlit courtyards. The senator moves through this world with practiced ease, greeting colleagues, conferring with allies, and measuring the mood of his peers. He understands that politics is as much about personal relationships as public policy. A casual word in the right ear can be more powerful than a formal speech. A private meeting can accomplish what hours of public debate cannot. The physical setting reinforces the gravity of these proceedings. Speakers mount platforms of polished marble to address their colleagues. Scribes record important decisions on papyrus and wax tablets. The sound of flowing water from nearby fountains provides a constant backdrop, a reminder that Rome's engineers have conquered nature itself to serve the empire's needs. The senator feels the weight of tradition in every stone, the accumulated wisdom of centuries guiding his decisions. By midday, the senator returns home. The main meal, known as the prandium, awaits, served in the dining room, or triclinium, where 3 couches surround a low table. This room represents the pinnacle of Roman domestic luxury, its walls decorated with frescoes depicting scenes of abundance and celebration. The couches themselves are works of art, their wooden frames inlaid with ivory and precious metals, their cushions covered in silk and fine wool. Guests recline on cushions as slaves bring trays of food. The art of reclining while eating requires practice and grace, transforming the simple act of dining into a statement of refinement and leisure. The senator has mastered this skill, as has every member of his social class. To eat while reclining demonstrates that one is free from the need to labor, that servants will provide everything necessary for comfort and sustenance. The slaves who serve this meal are specialists in their craft. The head server, perhaps a Greek captured in some long-ago conflict, understands the subtle preferences of every guest. He knows which wines pair with which dishes, how to present each course for maximum visual impact, and when to withdraw discreetly to allow private conversation. His assistants move with choreographed precision, ensuring that no guest ever wants for anything while remaining as invisible as possible. There are dishes of fish, roasted meats, lentils, and vegetables seasoned with herbs. The fish arrived that morning from the Mediterranean, still gleaming with freshness. The meat comes from animals raised on the senator's own estates, fed on grain he owns, and slaughtered by his own butchers. The vegetables were harvested from gardens maintained by his slaves, their flavor enhanced by herbs grown in carefully tended plots throughout his properties. Platters of fruit tell stories of the empire's reach. Apples from Gaul, their crispness speaking of northern orchards. Figs from Greece, sweet with Mediterranean sunshine. Dates from Africa, their exotic flavor carrying hints of desert winds and distant oases. Cups of watered wine, mixed to the perfect proportion, refresh and relax without dulling the mind. This wine comes from vineyards the senator inherited from his father, their grapes crushed by methods passed down through generations. The presentation of food is as important as its taste. Skilled cooks have arranged each dish to please the eye as well as the palate. Fruits are carved into decorative shapes. Meats are garnished with colorful vegetables. Even simple bread is shaped into pleasing forms and served on platters of precious metal. The visual feast reinforces the senator's status and demonstrates his appreciation for beauty in all its forms. The mood is unhurried. Conversation flows easily. Topics range from philosophy to poetry, from family affairs to news from distant provinces. The senator and his guests discuss the latest writings from Greek philosophers, debating questions of ethics and governance that have occupied brilliant minds for centuries. They share news from their estates, comparing harvests and discussing improvements to agricultural techniques. They speak of their children's education, their plans for political advancement, their hopes for the future of Rome itself. Laughter is soft and measured. The room remains cool, shaded by heavy curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. These curtains, woven from the finest materials available in the empire, filter the harsh sunlight while allowing cooling breezes to circulate. The effect is one of serene comfort, a refuge from the heat and intensity of the world outside. Servants fan the air with peacock feathers, creating gentle currents that carry the scent of roses from the garden. A conversation during meals serves purposes beyond mere entertainment. Political alliances are strengthened through shared meals and mutual respect. Business arrangements are discussed in relaxed settings where formal constraints need not apply. Family connections are reinforced through the inclusion of relatives and friends. Information is exchanged about conditions in distant provinces, the mood of the people, the effectiveness of various policies and appointments. After the meal, the senator often rests. A brief period of quiet, a time for sleep or private reading. His private chambers provide a sanctuary within the sanctuary, a place where even the presence of slaves is minimized to allow for complete relaxation. The bed, positioned to catch cooling breezes from the garden, offers respite from the day's activities. Fine linens, softer than silk, caress skin warmed by wine and good food. Scrolls with speeches, letters, or histories rest nearby on wooden shelves. These represent the senator's connection to the intellectual life of Rome, his participation in the cultural achievements that distinguish civilization from barbarity. He might read the latest work by a favorite historian, learning of events in distant parts of the empire. He might review drafts of speeches he plans to deliver in the forum, polishing arguments and refining his rhetoric. He might correspond with friends and allies, maintaining the network of relationships that sustain his political career. The library itself reflects the senator's education and interests. Scrolls are organized by subject and author, their cedar containers labeled with ivory tags. Works of history rest alongside treatises on agriculture. Philosophical texts share space with technical manuals on engineering and military tactics. Poetry in both Latin and Greek demonstrates the senator's cultural sophistication. Each scroll represents a significant investment, copied by skilled scribes and bound with materials that will preserve the text for generations. Later in the afternoon, a visit to the public baths may follow. There, in grand halls lined with marble, the senator enjoys a ritual of cleansing and relaxation, moving from warm rooms to hot chambers, then plunging into cold pools. The baths represent one of Rome's greatest social innovations, a place where citizens of all classes can gather in comfort and cleanliness. Yet even here, subtle distinctions of rank and status are maintained through the quality of oils used, the services of personal attendants, and the respect shown by other bathers. The bathing process itself is elaborate and pleasurable. Slaves anoint the senator's body with fine oils, their skilled hands working to relieve the tensions of the day. The warm rooms open his pores and relax his muscles. The hot chambers induce a cleansing sweat that purifies both body and spirit. The cold plunge that follows invigorates and refreshes, sending blood racing through his veins and sharpening his mind for the evening's activities. Conversations continue here, but the tone is less formal. Stripped of the togas that mark their rank, senators and citizens speak more freely of personal matters, family concerns, and private opinions. The senator learns much in these relaxed moments, gathering intelligence about the mood of the city, the effectiveness of policies, the loyalty of allies, and the schemes of rivals. Information flows as freely as the heated air, and wise men learn to listen as carefully as they speak. The bath complex itself is a marvel of engineering and luxury. Hypocaust systems heat the floors and walls, maintaining perfect temperatures throughout the seasons. Aqueducts supply unlimited fresh water, while sophisticated drainage systems carry away used water and waste. Marble from the finest quarries in the empire decorates every surface. Bronze fittings gleam with polish. The sound of flowing water creates a soothing atmosphere that encourages relaxation and contemplation. As evening approaches, entertainment begins. Musicians may perform in the garden courtyard. Poets recite verses. Intellectuals engage in quiet debate. The senator's villa becomes a center of cultural activity, attracting the most talented artists and thinkers in Rome. He takes pride in his patronage of the arts, understanding that such support reflects well on his character and contributes to the glory of Roman civilization. The garden courtyard itself has been designed as a natural amphitheater, with terraced seating areas that provide excellent acoustics and sight lines. Torches and oil lamps illuminate the performance space, their flickering light adding drama to the evening's entertainment. The scent of jasmine and roses perfumes the air, while the sound of fountains provides a gentle backdrop to the human voices raised in song or speech. Musicians perform on instruments crafted by master artisans. Lyres strung with the finest gut strings produce melodies of haunting beauty. Flutes carved from precious woods sing with voices as clear as mountain streams. Percussion instruments made from exotic materials add rhythm and excitement to the musical programs. The senator listens with the trained ear of a patron who understands and appreciates artistic excellence. If the senator is inclined, he may attend a banquet hosted by another noble family. These events are more lavish, with multiple courses, exotic ingredients, and flowing wine. The competition among Rome's elite to host the most impressive entertainment drives continuous innovation in cuisine, decoration, and artistic presentation. To be invited to such events is an honor. To decline without good reason is an insult that can have political consequences. Such banquets represent the pinnacle of Roman social life. Guests recline on couches arranged around multiple tables, each positioned to facilitate conversation while allowing easy access to the elaborate dishes being served. The menu might include delicacies from across the empire: oysters from Britain, peacock from Asia, spices from India, wines from the finest vineyards of Gaul and Greece. The cost of a single such meal could support a family of common citizens for months. The entertainment at these gatherings often includes performances by the most celebrated artists of the age. Actors perform scenes from beloved comedies and tragedies. Musicians play compositions written specifically for the occasion. Dancers perform with skill that transforms movement into art. Sometimes more exotic entertainments are provided. Trained animals, acrobats, or even gladiators performing carefully choreographed combat demonstrations. Beyond the villa walls, Rome continues its busy life. Gladiators train, merchants bargain, slaves labor. The Colosseum prepares for another day of spectacle. The senator is aware of this parallel world, this realm of struggle and commerce that supports the luxury of his existence. He sees the smoke rising from workshops and kitchens, hears the distant sounds of construction and trade, knows that thousands of people labor to maintain the system that provides his comfort and security. The contrast between his world and theirs is stark, but not necessarily troubling to the senator's conscience. Roman society is built on such distinctions, and he has been raised to accept them as natural and necessary. The gods themselves are arranged in hierarchies of power and responsibility. The emperor rules over senators, senators over citizens, citizens over slaves. Each level of society has its duties and privileges, its obligations and rewards. Yet the senator is not entirely insulated from the realities of common life. He sees the faces of petitioners who come to his morning salutatio. He hears reports from his stewards about conditions on his estates. He receives information from his agents about the mood of the people in various parts of the city and empire. A wise politician understands that his own fortunes are tied to the welfare of those he governs and the stability of the system that supports him. But inside these marble rooms, the senator feels distant from it all. The world of blood and sand is something he watches from a seat high above, in the shade of the amphitheater's best viewing boxes. He may cheer. He may offer a signal for mercy or death with the turn of his hand. But when the games end, he returns to his villa, to soft couches and quiet halls. The entertainment value of gladiatorial combat does not require him to dwell on its brutal realities. It is spectacle, not personal experience. His box at the Colosseum, like his villa, reflects his status and removes him from direct contact with the masses. Cushioned seats provide comfort during long programs. Awnings protect him from sun and rain. Servants bring refreshments and attend to his every need. The height of his position provides excellent views while symbolically reinforcing his elevation above common citizens. He can observe the crowd's reactions, gauge the popular mood, and demonstrate his own responses for political effect. The games themselves serve multiple purposes beyond entertainment. They display the power and wealth of those who sponsor them. They provide an outlet for popular emotions that might otherwise turn to political unrest. They demonstrate Roman military superiority through the conquest and subjugation of foreign peoples. They reinforce social hierarchies by clearly distinguishing between those who watch and those who fight, between those who live and those who die for the amusement of others. As night falls, oil lamps flicker against painted walls. The senator retires to his sleeping quarters. The transition from day to night in the villa is marked by ceremonial activities as precise as those that began in the morning. Slaves light the oil lamps that will burn through the hours of darkness. Security is checked and confirmed. The day's accounts are reviewed and recorded. Personal attendants prepare the senator's sleeping chamber for the night's rest. Lying on smooth linen sheets, he drifts into rest, protected, well-fed, surrounded by symbols of status and success. His bed, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, supports him on a mattress stuffed with the finest materials available in the empire. The sheets, woven from flax grown in Egypt's fertile Nile Valley, are softer than silk and cool against his skin. Pillows filled with down from northern geese cradle his head in perfect comfort. The sleeping chamber itself is designed to promote rest and tranquility. The walls are painted in soothing colors that relax the mind and prepare it for sleep. Incense burns in small braziers, filling the air with fragrances that calm the spirit and ward off insects. The room is positioned to catch cooling breezes from the garden, while remaining protected from street noise and disturbance. Night sounds in the villa create a symphony of security and comfort. The soft footsteps of guards making their rounds. The gentle splash of fountains in the courtyards. The whisper of wind through the carefully tended gardens. The distant murmur of slaves going about their evening duties. All these sounds blend together to create an atmosphere of peace and order that helps ensure restful sleep. And so the cycle continues. Each day in the senator's life follows patterns established by generations of privilege and refinement. Each night brings rest earned through the exercise of power and the enjoyment of luxury. The villa stands as both home and symbol, a physical manifestation of everything Roman civilization has achieved and everything it promises to those who serve it well. Now, as you lie comfortably, far from the noise of ancient Rome, imagine the quiet of that villa at night. The gentle rustle of curtains in the breeze. The distant sound of a fountain trickling in the courtyard. The soft steps of a household servant extinguishing lamps one by one. Let yourself rest as we prepare to bring this journey to a close. But before you drift completely into peaceful slumber, let your mind wander one more time. Beyond the senator's villa, beyond the marble walls and perfumed gardens, Rome never truly sleeps. In the darkness, other stories unfold. The night watch patrols the streets with measured steps and flickering torches. Bakers begin their work in the hours before dawn, preparing bread for the coming day. In taverns scattered throughout the city, citizens gather to drink wine and share the gossip and rumors that shape public opinion. And in the quarters where the common people live, in the insulae that rise story upon story into the night sky, families crowd together in spaces no larger than a single room in the senator's villa. Here, different dreams take shape. Dreams of advancement and opportunity. Dreams of escape from poverty and limitation. Dreams that will drive the next chapter of our ancient story. When dawn breaks once again over the eternal city, the cycle of Roman life begins anew. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. From the dusty training yards of the gladiators to the desperate escape of Spartacus and his followers. From the dark, narrow tunnels beneath the Colosseum to the marble halls and shaded gardens of Rome's elite. A slow, winding journey through the layers of life and survival in ancient Rome. If you're still awake, thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end. And if you drifted off somewhere between the clang of wooden swords and the quiet fountains of the senator's villa, that's perfectly fine too. That's kind of the whole point. If you enjoyed this slower, sleep-friendly dive into history, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it was when you pressed play. It's always nice seeing where in the world these late-night history journeys are reaching. For now, I'll let the noise of the arena fade, the footsteps along the marble floors grow softer, and the distant cheers of the crowd fall quiet. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time.